The Winchester lay cold against Colt Mercer's palm, its weight familiar as his own heartbeat. He stood on the porch of his ranch house at dawn, watching the horizon bleed orange and purple, listening to the cattle low in the distance. 34 years old, 10,000 acres, 200 head of prime Montana beef, a house that could shelter a family of 8. Empty. The wood beneath his boots creaked, the same boards he'd laid 5 years ago when he'd built this place with his own hands, thinking she'll come. Whoever she was. Whichever one finally said yes and meant it. None had. "Coffee's ready." The voice came from behind him, quiet and unremarkable. Mara Hale, his housekeeper, stood in the doorway with a pot in her hand and that same unreadable expression she always wore, brown hair pulled back severe, dressed the color of ash. 30 years old and widowed 3 years now, working for him for 2. "Leave it on the table," Colt said without turning. He heard her footsteps retreat. The door clicked shut. The sky lightened another degree, and he was alone again. That was the problem, wasn't it? Always alone, even when he wasn't. The town of Copper Ridge existed because men like Colt Mercer willed it to. 63 buildings, half of them his doing, the general store he'd financed, the livery he'd built when old Henderson's burned down, the church he'd donated lumber for even though he rarely darkened its doors. He rode in twice a week, and people noticed. They always noticed. Harrison at the bank tipped his hat. Mrs. Yates at the mercantile smiled too wide, showing her daughter off like prized livestock. Even Sheriff Polk straightened when Colt passed, though Polk was 10 years older and had been keeping law here since before Colt owned his first acre. "Mercer," Polk nodded from the jailhouse steps. "Got a minute?" Colt reined in his stallion, a massive bay named Brutus that cost more than most men made in a year. "What is it?" "Garrett Voss is back in town." The name landed like a stone in still water. Colt's jaw tightened. "That's so. Bought the old Pritchard Ranch. 2,500 acres last I heard. Fixing to expand." Polk's eyes held something. Not quite warning, not quite sympathy. "Thought you should know." Garrett Voss. Harvard-educated, East Coast money, a smile that could sell sand in a desert. They'd competed once before, years ago, over a woman named Elizabeth Brennan. She'd chosen Garrett, then left him 6 months later when she realized Montana wasn't Boston, and never would be. Now he was back. "Appreciate the information," Colt said, gathering his reins. "Colt." Polk stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Man like Voss doesn't come back here to raise cattle. He's got plans, and you know how he operates." "I know." "Just watch yourself." Colt touched the brim of his hat and rode on, but the warning sat heavy in his chest. Garrett Voss wasn't just competition. He was a reminder of every inadequacy Colt had ever felt. The lack of formal education, the rough edges no amount of success could smooth, the persistent sense that maybe he'd built his empire on land that would never be enough to make him worthy of the kind of woman he wanted, or thought he wanted. The house smelled like bread when he returned that evening. Mara had been baking, which meant she'd finished the laundry early and had time to spare. She moved through routines like clockwork, efficient, invisible, essential. He found her in the kitchen, flour dusting her forearms. She glanced up when he entered, then back down at the dough she was kneading. "Supper's in an hour," she said. "Fine." He should have left, gone to his study, reviewed his ledgers, done anything other than stand there watching her work. But something made him stay. The quiet competence of her movements, maybe, or the way the lamplight caught the loose strands of hair that had escaped her bun. "You need something?" she asked without looking up. "No." Silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable exactly, but weighted. It was always like this. Conversations that didn't quite land, words that stopped just short of meaning. "How long you planning to stay on here?" The question came out rougher than he'd intended. Her hand stilled. "That an invitation to leave?" "No, just asking. Long as you'll have me, I suppose." She resumed kneading, her knuckles pressing into the dough with steady rhythm. "Why?" He didn't have an answer, or he did, but couldn't name it. "No reason." She made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something else entirely. You're a terrible liar, Mr. Mercer. Colt, he said. How many times I got to tell you? Just Colt. Colt, then. She shaped the dough into a ball, set it in a bowl, covered it with a cloth. Anything else you need? Everything. Nothing. He didn't know anymore. No, he said, and left before she could see the confusion on his face. The letter arrived 3 days later, delivered by a rider from the territorial office in Helena. Colt read it twice, then a third time, each pass making the words more real and less believable. Dear Mr. Mercer, at the request of Mr. Theodore Hartwell of Boston, I write to introduce his daughter, Miss Victoria Hartwell, who will be visiting Montana Territory for the coming month. Mr. Hartwell, being acquainted with your reputation and standing, hopes you might extend hospitality and perhaps serve as guide to our region's opportunities. Miss Hartwell is accomplished in literature, music, and the domestic arts. She seeks to understand the Western Territories with an eye toward settlement and investment. Your assistance in this matter would be most appreciated. Respectfully, James Morrison Territorial Secretary Colt set the letter down, picked it up again, read the closing lines once more. A Boston socialite, educated, refined, coming here. And someone, probably Morrison himself, the meddling bastard, had suggested Colt Mercer as her escort. It stank of setup, of matchmaking, of exactly the kind of arranged inevitability that had failed him 5 times before. But Victoria Hartwell. He'd heard the name. The Hartwells owned shipping lines, railroad stock, half of Back Bay, old money, real money, the kind that came with education and polish and all the things Colt had taught himself but would never truly possess. A woman like that wouldn't stay. Couldn't stay. Montana would chew her up and spit her out inside a month. Unless she was different. Unless... Bad news? Mara stood in the doorway, a basket of mending in her arms. He hadn't heard her approach. No, he said, folding the letter. Just business. Her eyes flicked to the paper in his hands, then back to his face. She didn't press. She never pressed. It was one of the things he appreciated about her, the lack of prying, the absence of demands. It was also, he realized with sudden clarity, part of what made her so easy to overlook. I'll be having a visitor, he said. Month from now. Woman from Boston. Theodore Hartwell's daughter. Something crossed Mara's face, too quick to name, gone before he could identify it. I'll prepare the guest room. Yeah, thanks. She nodded and turned to go. Mara, she paused. You ever think about leaving here? Going back east, maybe? Somewhere civilized? The question seemed to surprise her. She shifted the basket to her other hip. I'm from Nebraska. I've seen civilized. Wasn't much impressed. But you'd go if the opportunity came up. Depends on the opportunity. Her gaze held his, direct and unnervingly steady. Why do you ask? Because he wanted to know if everyone eventually left. Because he needed to understand if the land he loved was a trap or a home. Because somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice whispered that maybe the problem wasn't the women who'd refused him. Maybe the problem was him. No reason, he said. She studied him a moment longer, then left without another word. Garrett Voss's ranch sat 8 miles east, across the river and up into the foothills. Colt rode past it on his way to check fence lines, and what he saw made his teeth clench. New buildings. A barn twice the size of anything in the county. Corrals built from imported lumber, smooth and perfect as piano keys. Men working in organized crews, their movements coordinated in a way that spoke of military precision or Eastern efficiency, both foreign concepts to Montana ranching, where every man worked his own way and damned the consequences. And there, supervising from horseback, sat Garrett Voss himself. He'd gotten older, grayer at the temples. But the posture was the same, straight-backed, aristocratic, the bearing of a man who'd never questioned his place in the world. He saw Colt and smiled. "Mercer," Voss called out, raising a hand. "Didn't expect to see you on this side of the river." Colt had 2 choices, ride on and look like a coward, or stop and engage. He chose the latter, guiding Brutus toward the fence line. "Voss," he nodded. "Heard you were back." "Couldn't stay away." Voss gestured at the construction around them. "This country gets in your blood, doesn't it? Even when you try to leave." "That why you came back? Blood?" Among other things, Voss's smile didn't waver. I heard about your success. 10,000 acres. Impressive for a man who started with nothing. The implication hung between them that Colt had started
This story
with
was
nothing,
posted
while
on the
Voss had
channel
started
west
with
of
everything
Betrayal.
and merely added
Please
to
do
it.
not repost it in
Land's
any
land,
form.
Colt said. Doesn't care where you come from. True enough, but the people on it do. Voss leaned forward in his saddle. I'm planning a gathering, week from Saturday, hoping to meet the local ranchers, establish some neighborly relations. You'll come, of course. It wasn't quite a command, but it wasn't quite an invitation either. I'll think about it. Bring a guest if you'd like. I understand there's a young woman visiting from Boston soon, Victoria Hartwell. Lovely family. I've known Theodore for years. Of course he had. How'd you hear about that? Colt asked. Morrison mentioned it. Small territory, Mercer. Word travels. Voss straightened. In any case, I hope to see you there. We have much to discuss: boundary lines, water rights, the future of ranching in this valley. Better to be allies than competitors, don't you think? I think competition keeps a man honest, Voss laughed, a sound like polished silverware. Still the same rough-edged frontiersman. Some things never change. But they should, Mercer. They should. This territory's growing up. Time we grew with it. Colt didn't respond. He touched his hat brim and rode on, feeling Voss's eyes on his back the entire way. The days blurred. Calving season approached, which meant 16-hour days and little sleep. Colt threw himself into the work, mending fence, breaking horses, checking stock, anything to keep his hands busy and his mind occupied. But at night, when he returned to the house and found supper waiting, when he sat across from Mara at the kitchen table because the dining room felt too vast and empty, he couldn't escape the weight of questions he didn't want to ask. Heard Garrett Voss is hosting a gathering, Mara said one evening, passing him the potatoes. You hear everything. Mrs. Yates talks. I listen. She served herself a small portion. You going? Haven't decided. You should. He looked up, surprised. Why? Because not going makes it look like you're afraid of him. I'm not afraid of Garrett Voss. Then prove it. She met his gaze across the table. Go. Take your Boston visitor. Show him you're not intimidated. It was the most direct advice she'd ever offered. Colt turned it over in his mind, testing the logic. What do you care if I go or not? I don't. She cut her meat with precise movements. But you do. I can see it eating at you. Nothing's eating at me. Mr. Colt. She set down her fork. I've worked for you 2 years. I know when something's bothering you. You get quiet, quieter than usual. And you've been that way since Voss came back. He wanted to deny it. Couldn't. He's got a way of making a man feel small, Colt admitted. Always has. Then don't let him. Easy to say. I didn't say it was easy. I said do it anyway. She picked up her fork again. Besides, if this Victoria Hartwell is everything the letter claims, bringing her to Voss's gathering might work in your favor. Let her see both options. Both options? The phrase settled over him like a cold wind. You think I'm trying to court her, he said. Aren't you? I don't know what I'm doing. Mara's expression softened. Just barely. Just enough to notice. That's the first honest thing you've said all week. They finished the meal in silence. When Mara rose to clear the dishes, Colt stopped her with a hand on her wrist. Thank you, he said. For what? For saying it straight. She looked at his hand on her wrist, then at his face. Something passed between them, a current, a recognition, a moment of connection that lasted 3 heartbeats too long. Then she pulled away, gentle but firm. You're welcome. She carried the dishes to the sink, and Colt sat there feeling like he'd just missed something important, but couldn't name what. Victoria Hartwell arrived on a Thursday afternoon, stepping off the stagecoach in a dress that probably cost more than Colt's best horse. She was beautiful, there was no denying that. Dark hair pinned in an elaborate arrangement, skin pale as porcelain, eyes the color of winter sky. 26 years old and poised like royalty. Colt met her at the station, hat in hand, suddenly aware of every callus, every scar, every rough edge he carried. Miss Hartwell, he offered a slight bow. Welcome to Copper Ridge. Mr. Mercer. Her smile was practiced, perfect. How kind of you to meet me. The journey was exhausting, but I'm eager to see your Montana. Your Montana. As if he owned it, as if anyone could. I've got a wagon waiting. The ranch is about an hour's ride. Wonderful. He helped her into the wagon. She weighed nothing, moved like glass, and climbed up beside her. The drive began in polite conversation, her impressions of the West, his explanations of the landscape, the careful dance of strangers assessing each other. But something felt off. She asked the right questions, made the right observations, but her eyes kept drifting, to the town behind them, to the horizon ahead, to everything except the man beside her. When they reached the ranch, Mara was waiting on the porch. She'd changed into a cleaner dress, though it was still plain, still gray. Her hair was still pulled back severe. She looked like what she was, a housekeeper. Help. Miss Hartwell, this is Mrs. Hale, Colt said. She manages the household. How lovely. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. You must show me to my room. I'm simply exhausted. Mara nodded and led her inside. Colt watched them go. The Eastern socialite and the frontier widow moving through his house like figures in a play he didn't understand. The first week was theater. Victoria accompanied him on rides, asked intelligent questions about ranching, admired the sunset with appropriate enthusiasm. She was everything he'd thought he wanted, educated, cultured, beautiful, and utterly wrong. It wasn't one thing. It was 1,000 small things. The way she flinched when cattle lowed too close, the wrinkle of her nose at the smell of horses, the careful distance she maintained from anything that might soil her dress, but more than that, the way she watched him, like she was evaluating, measuring, running calculations behind those winter sky eyes. You've built something remarkable here, she said one evening over dinner. They sat in the formal dining room, Mara serving in silence. Your business acumen is impressive. Just hard work, and savvy investment, I'd wager. My father always says the West rewards those willing to take risks. She paused. Do you ever think about expansion, diversification? I think about keeping my cattle alive and my land productive. Yes, but beyond that, there are opportunities, railroads, mining interests, land speculation. A man of your position could leverage his holdings into something much larger. Colt set down his fork. I'm a rancher, Miss Hartwell, not a speculator. But you could be both. She leaned forward slightly. With the right partnerships, the right connections, you could transform this ranch into an empire. It's already what I want it to be. Something flickered in her expression. Disappointment, maybe, or recalculation. Of course. Forgive me. I merely thought, more wine? Mara appeared at her elbow, bottle in hand. Yes, thank you. Victoria held out her glass, barely glancing at the woman serving her. Colt watched Mara pour, watched her retreat, watched her disappear into the kitchen like smoke, and for the first time in years, he wondered what it must be like to be essential and invisible at the same time. Garrett Voss's gathering was scheduled for Saturday. Victoria insisted they attend. It would be rude to decline, she said, and I'm curious to meet your neighbors. Your neighbors, not our neighbors. The distinction sat heavy. They arrived at Voss's ranch in the late afternoon. The place looked like a plantation transplanted from Virginia. White columns, manicured grounds, servants in uniform. Colt felt like a barbarian at the gates. Voss met them at the entrance, and his smile when he saw Victoria was the smile of a wolf spotting prey. Miss Hartwell. He took her hand, brought it nearly to his lips. Theodore's daughter. I'd recognize the family resemblance anywhere. You have your mother's eyes. Mr. Voss. Victoria's smile matched his, polished, perfect, predatory. My father speaks highly of you. And I of him. Please come in. Mercer. Voss nodded at Colt like an afterthought. Good of you to bring such lovely company. The gathering was small. A dozen ranchers and their wives, a few businessmen from Helena, a territorial judge. Colt knew most of them, but in this setting, surrounded by Voss's imported furniture and crystal decanters, he felt like a stranger. Victoria, however, bloomed. She moved through the room like she'd been born to it, charming the judge, impressing the ranchers' wives, and, most tellingly, spending an inordinate amount of time in conversation with Garrett Voss. Colt watched
This story
from the
was
periphery,
posted on the
nursing
channel
a
west
whiskey
of
he didn't
Betrayal.
want.
Please do not
"She's not
repost
for
it
you,"
in any form.
the voice came from beside him. He turned to find Sarah Polk, the sheriff's wife, a woman known for speaking her mind. "Beg pardon?" "That girl." Sarah nodded toward Victoria. "She's shopping, and you're not what she's looking to buy." "I don't—" "Yes, you do. I've seen that look on your face before, Colt Mercer. You're hoping, but hope doesn't change facts." Sarah sipped her wine. "She wants what Voss has: money, connections, a ladder to climb. Your ranch is impressive, but it's still a ranch. His is a stepping stone." "You don't know that." "I'm a woman. I know exactly that." Sarah patted his arm. "Find someone who wants what you're actually offering, not what you could become." She walked away, leaving Colt with the whiskey and a truth he didn't want to accept. The ride home was quiet. Victoria stared out at the darkness, and Colt didn't have the energy to fill the silence. "Mr. Voss is quite accomplished," she said finally. "He is. And his vision for the valley, it's ambitious, transformative. That's one word for it." She turned to look at him. "You disapprove." "I think there's a difference between building something and buying it." "Is there? In the end, what matters is what you have, not how you got it. That where you're from, maybe, not here." "Mr. Mercer, Colt." She softened her tone. "I didn't come to Montana to argue philosophy. I came to understand opportunity, and I think I'm beginning to." They reached the ranch. Colt helped her down from the wagon, and she paused, her hand lingering on his arm. "You're a good man," she said. "Honorable, strong. But I'm not sure you understand what the world is becoming. It's not enough to work hard anymore. You have to work smart. Position yourself, build alliances." "I'm not interested in alliances. I'm interested in—" He stopped. What was he interested in? He'd thought he knew. Land, legacy, a partner to share it with. But standing there with Victoria Hartwell's hand on his arm, feeling nothing, he realized he'd been chasing ghosts. "Good night, Colt," she said, and went inside. He stood in the darkness, listening to the cattle, the wind, the vast Montana silence. And then he heard it. A sound from the kitchen. Dishes, he thought. Mara cleaning up from the supper she'd prepared and eaten alone while he paraded through Garrett Voss's palace. He found her at the sink, sleeves rolled up, hands in soapy water. "You're back," she said without turning. "Yeah." "How was it?" "Exactly what you'd expect." She made a small sound. Acknowledgement, not judgment. Colt leaned against the doorframe. "Why didn't you ever remarry?" The question stopped her. She turned, surprise clear on her face. "That's a personal question." "I know. I'm asking anyway." She dried her hands on her apron, considering. "Because the first time was enough." "Bad marriage?" "No. Good one, actually. Thomas was a good man. But he's gone, and I don't see the point in trying to replace something that can't be replaced." She met his eyes. "Why do you ask?" "Trying to understand something." "What?" "Why I keep looking for what doesn't exist." Mara crossed her arms. "Maybe you're looking in the wrong places." "Where should I be looking?" The question hung between them, heavier than he'd intended. Mara's expression shifted, something vulnerable breaking through the careful neutrality she always wore. "I don't know," she said quietly, "but I know it's not in Boston drawing rooms or imported crystal. It's not in women who see you as a project or a stepping stone. It's—" She stopped, shook her head. "It's late. You should get some rest." "Mara, good night, Colt." She turned back to the sink, dismissing him. And Colt stood there, feeling like he'd just been handed a map, but couldn't read the directions. Victoria left 3 days later. Not back to Boston. Not yet. To Garrett Voss's ranch, where she'd been invited to stay and learn more about his development plans. She told Colt over breakfast, her tone apologetic but her eyes bright with excitement. "It's purely professional," she said. "Mr. Voss has offered to show me his investment strategies, his approach to territorial expansion. It's an educational opportunity." "Of course," Colt said. "You understand." "I do." And he did. He understood perfectly. Victoria Hartwell had assessed her options and made her choice. Garrett Voss offered sophistication, connections, a pathway to the kind of life she wanted. Colt offered land and cattle and honest work. It wasn't even close. "I hope we can remain friends," she said. "Sure." She left in Voss's carriage, and Colt watched her go without regret. The absence of feeling was startling. He'd thought he'd be angry, or hurt, or at least disappointed. Instead, he felt relieved. "Good riddance," Mara said from behind him. He turned. She stood on the porch, arms crossed, wearing an expression he'd never seen before. Not quite satisfaction, not quite anger. Something fiercer. "You didn't like her," Colt said. "I didn't like how she treated you, like you were something to be improved, fixed." Mara stepped closer. "You don't need fixing, Colt Mercer. You need someone who sees what's already there." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling outward. "And what's there?" he asked. "A man who built something real, who works until his hands bleed, who cares about his land and his cattle and the people who depend on him." She paused. "A man who's too damn stubborn to see what's right in front of him." "What's in front of me?" Mara opened her mouth, closed it, shook her head. "Nothing," she said. "Never mind, I've got work to do." She turned and went inside, leaving Colt alone with the Montana wind and the growing certainty that he'd been blind for a very long time. The storm came on a Tuesday. Not the gentle rains of spring, but a violent, howling thing, wind that bent trees double, rain that fell like gravel, thunder that shook the foundation. Colt spent the afternoon securing livestock, battening down hatches, fighting nature with everything he had. By evening, he was soaked through and exhausted. He stumbled into the house, tracking mud, dripping water, looking for warmth. Mara met him with towels and a blanket, her face tight with worry. "You're half frozen," she said. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Sit." She pushed him toward the fireplace. "I'll make coffee." He sat. She disappeared into the kitchen, and he stared at the flames, feeling the warmth seep back into his bones. When she returned, she'd changed from her wet dress into something dry. Her hair was down. He'd never seen it down before. It fell past her shoulders, dark, and shot through with auburn in the firelight. She looked different, or maybe he was finally seeing her clearly. "Here." She handed him the coffee. Their fingers brushed. The touch was electric. Mara pulled back, but not quickly enough. Colt saw the flush on her cheeks, the quickening of her breath. "Mara," he said. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you're finally noticing I'm here." Her voice cracked. "I've been here, Colt, 2 years. Every morning making your coffee, every evening making your supper, cleaning your house, mending your clothes, listening to you talk about the women you thought you wanted while I—" She stopped, pressed her hand to her mouth. "While you what?" Colt stood, the blanket falling away. "While I fell in love with you, you impossible, blind, stubborn man." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and terrible and true. Colt stared at her. Mara stared back, tears streaming down her face, her entire body trembling. "I didn't—" he started. "I know you didn't." "Know you? You never saw me." "Not really. I was just the help. The widow who kept things running while you chased ghosts." She wiped her eyes roughly. "And I told myself it was enough. Being near you, being useful. But it's not. It's not enough, and I can't keep doing this. Mara, I'm leaving." She said it like a sentence. "Tomorrow, if the storm passes. I'll find work in town or Helena or anywhere that isn't here." "No. You can't stop me. I'm not trying to stop you. I'm trying to—" He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. "I'm trying to tell you I've been an idiot." "What?" "An idiot. A blind, stubborn, impossible idiot, just like you said." He took her face in his hands, feeling her tears wet against his palms. "You're right. I didn't see you. But I see you now, Mara. I see you." "Colt." He kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't tentative. It was 2 years of blindness and loneliness and need crashing together, desperate and overwhelming and right in a way nothing else had ever been. Mara gasped against his mouth, then kissed him back with equal intensity. Her hands fisted in his wet shirt, pulling him closer, and the world narrowed to this: her lips, Her warmth, the sound of her breathing, the rightness of her in his arms. When they finally broke apart, they were both shaking. "Don't leave," Colt said. Please, don't leave.
This story was posted
I
on the
can't stay
channel
like
west
this.
of
Not as your
Betrayal.
housekeeper.
Please do
not
not
as something
repost
you finally
it in
noticed
any
because
form.
everyone else left. Then stay as my wife. The words came out before he could think them through, but they felt right. Truer than anything he'd said in years. Mara froze. "What?" "Marry me. Not because it's convenient, not because you're here, because He swallowed hard. "Because I love you. I think I've loved you for months and was too damn stupid to recognize it. You're everything I need, Mara. Everything I've been looking for while you were right here, and I—" She kissed him again, cutting off the words. Softer this time, sweeter. When she pulled back, she was crying again, but smiling. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." The storm raged all night. But inside the ranch house, in front of the dying fire, Colt Mercer held the woman who'd been there all along, and finally understood what he'd been too blind to see. Love wasn't something to chase or conquer or acquire. It was something that grew quietly in the spaces between words, in the routines of daily life, in the steady presence of someone who saw you, truly saw you, and stayed anyway. Thunder shook the walls, rain hammered the roof, the Montana frontier howled its fury outside, but inside everything was finally perfectly still. Morning came too bright, too fast. Colt woke on the couch with Mara's head on his chest, her hair spilling across his shirt, still damp from the storm. For a moment he didn't move, didn't want to disturb whatever fragile thing they'd built in the darkness. Then she stirred, and her eyes opened, and reality crashed back in. "We fell asleep," she said. "Yeah." She sat up, smoothing her hair, and he saw the moment the walls started going back up. Her shoulders squared, her jaw tightened. The vulnerability from last night was already fading behind that careful neutral mask she wore so well. "Mara, I need to start breakfast." She stood, not meeting his eyes. "The hands will be here soon." "Wait." He caught her wrist. "We need to talk about this." "About what?" "About what I said last night. About you were exhausted. The storm. Everything with Victoria. People say things they don't mean when— I meant it." He pulled her back down beside him. Every word. She finally looked at him, and the fear in her eyes gutted him. "Colt, you can't just decide you want to marry me because you finally realized I exist. That's not how this works." "Then tell me how it works." "I don't know." She pulled away, standing again, pacing to the window. "I've spent 2 years watching you court women who didn't want you, 2 years keeping my mouth shut and my feelings buried because that was the job. And now you kiss me once and propose and expect me to just— what? Believe it?" The doubt in her voice was a knife. He'd done that. Years of looking past her, looking through her, treating her like furniture. "I know I've been blind," he said. "I know I don't deserve—" "Stop." She spun to face him. "Don't make this about deserving. Make it about choosing. Because if you're choosing me because everyone else left, that's not good enough. I won't be the woman you settled for." "You're not—" "Then prove it." Her voice cracked. "Prove it's not just convenience or loneliness or—" A knock at the door cut her off. Heavy, urgent. Colt cursed under his breath and answered it. Pete Jennings, his foreman, stood there looking grim. "We got problems, boss. Storm took out a section of fence on the north pasture. 20 head scattered, maybe more." Colt's jaw tightened. "How bad?" "Bad enough. Need every man we got to round them up before they drift too far." He glanced back at Mara. She'd already retreated to the kitchen, the moment shattered. "Give me 5 minutes," Colt told Pete. When he turned back, Mara was gone. The search for the cattle took all day. They found 18 of the 20, but 2 heifers were just gone, probably spooked into the hills where coyotes and mountain lions would finish what the storm started. By the time Colt rode back to the ranch, the sun was setting and exhaustion sat heavy in his bones. The house was dark except for a single lamp in the kitchen. He found Mara there, kneading bread dough with mechanical precision. "Found most of them," he said. "Good." The single word held no warmth, no curiosity, nothing. She might as well have been talking to a stranger. "Mara, about this morning, I think we should forget last night happened. She didn't look up. Both of us were emotional. The storm, everything. It's better if we just go back to how things were. Like hell. Colt. No. He crossed to her, flour dust rising as he gripped the table edge. You don't get to confess you love me and then take it back. That's not fair. Fair? She laughed, bitter. You want to talk about fair? I've loved you for 2 years, Colt. 2 years of watching you pine after women who saw you as a project or a bank account. 2 years of wishing you'd look at me the way you looked at them. And the one time you finally do, I'm supposed to believe it's real? It is real. For how long? Until the next Victoria Hartwell steps off the stage? Until some other Boston socialite decides Montana might be quaint? The accusation stung because part of him wondered the same thing. What if this was just reaction? What if he was confusing gratitude and loneliness for something deeper? But then he looked at her, really looked. The flower on her forearms, the strand of hair coming loose from her bun, the way her hands moved through the dough, strong and sure, the set of her jaw that said she'd been hurt before and wouldn't risk it again without proof. And he knew. There won't be a next Victoria, he said quietly. There won't be a next anyone, because I don't want perfect. I don't want polish. I want someone who knows what this life costs and chooses it anyway. I want someone who sees me covered in mud and doesn't flinch. I want... He stopped, swallowed hard. I want you, Mara. Just you. She stopped kneading, her hands stilled in the dough. Words are easy, she whispered. Then I'll show you. However long it takes, I'll show you. She looked at him finally, and the longing in her eyes nearly broke him. I can't be your housekeeper anymore, she said. If we're going to try this, that has to end. I can't serve you breakfast and share your bed. I can't be both. Then you'll be my wife. Not yet. She pulled her hands from the dough, wiping them on her apron. Not until I know this is real. Not until... She paused. There's something you should know. The shift in her tone raised alarm bells. What? Garrett Voss came by while you were out. Colt went still. When? This afternoon. Said he was checking on neighbors after the storm. She met his eyes. He invited me to dinner at his ranch tomorrow night. The words landed like a punch. What did you tell him? I said I'd think about it. Why would you? Because I'm tired of being invisible, Colt. I'm tired of being the help. And when Garrett Voss looks at me, he doesn't see a housekeeper. He sees a woman. She lifted her chin. Maybe I want to know what that feels like. Jealousy hit him like a physical thing, hot and sharp and irrational. He's playing games. That's what he does. Maybe, or maybe he's just interested. In what? A frontier widow with no connections and no money? The moment the words left his mouth, he knew he'd made a mistake. Mara's expression went cold. Get out of my kitchen, she said. Mara, I didn't mean... Yes, you did. That's exactly what you meant. I'm not good enough for Garrett Voss, just barely good enough for you now that all your better options have dried up. That's not out now. He wanted to argue, wanted to take back the words, but the look on her face said arguing would only make it worse. So he left. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Colt lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation, hating himself. He'd spent years making Mara feel invisible, and the one time she pushed back, he'd confirmed every fear she had. The worst part, he understood why Voss had invited her, not out of genuine interest. Garrett didn't operate that way. He'd seen something shift between Colt and Mara, some crack in the armor, and now he was exploiting it. Because that's what Garrett Voss did. He found weaknesses and pressed until something broke. Morning came. Colt found a note on the kitchen table. Gone to town, back this afternoon. M. She'd left coffee, though, still warm. He drank it standing at the window, watching his land stretch out to the horizon, and wondered when everything had gotten so complicated. Pete found him an hour later checking fence lines. Boss, we got a situation. What kind? Water kind. Voss dammed the creek running through his property, diverted the whole flow eastward. Our cattle can't reach the water on the north pasture. Colt's hands tightened on the fence post. When? Must have been yesterday during the storm. Didn't notice until this morning. Pete spat tobacco juice. Legal, technically. It's his land, but it's a bastard move.
This story
Legal or
was
not,
posted on the
it was
channel
war.
west of Betrayal.
Water was
Please do not
everything in
repost
Montana.
it in any
Without
form.
access to that creek, Colt would have to move 100 head south, overcrowding pastures that were already pushed to capacity. Get the men together, Colt said. I'm riding to Voss's place. You sure that's smart? I didn't say it was smart. I said I'm doing it. The ride to Voss's ranch felt longer than it was. By the time Colt arrived, his anger had crystallized into something cold and controlled. He found Voss in his study. Of course he had a study, imported mahogany and leather chairs, sitting behind a desk like some kind of frontier lord. Mercer. Voss looked up, unsurprised. I wondered when you'd arrive. You damned my water. I redirected water flowing through my property. Perfectly legal. It's a declaration of war. It's business. Voss gestured to a chair. Sit. Let's discuss this like civilized men. I'll stand. Suit yourself. Voss leaned back. Here's the reality, Mercer. This valley isn't big enough for both our operations. Not the way we're growing. One of us needs to consolidate. The other needs to sell. I'm not selling. Then you're the one who needs to consolidate. And I'm offering you a fair price. More than fair, actually. Enough to buy land elsewhere. Start fresh. This is my land. It's land. That's all. Dirt and grass. You're not buried here yet. Voss smiled. Unless you want to be. The threat hung in the air. Not violence. Voss wouldn't dirty his hands that way. But economic warfare, legal maneuvering, death by 1,000 cuts until Colt had no choice but to sell or watch everything collapse. I'm not leaving, Colt said. Then you're a fool. Because I will crush you, Mercer. Not out of malice, nothing personal, just business. You're in my way, and obstacles get removed. Voss paused. Although, there is one other option. What? Partnership. Merge our operations, pool our resources. You keep managing the cattle side, you're good at that, I'll admit. I handle expansion, investment, growth. We split profits 60-40. 60 in whose favor? Mine, obviously. I'm bringing more to the table. Colt laughed, sharp and humorless. So I do all the work while you collect the money. That your idea of partnership? That's how the world works. Capital versus labor. Ownership versus management. Don't blame me for understanding economics better than you do. I understand economics fine. I also understand you're scared. Voss's smile slipped. Excuse me? You're scared I won't sell. Scared you can't actually push me out without destroying your own reputation in the process. So you're offering partnership as a backup plan, hoping I'm desperate enough to take it. Colt leaned forward. I'm not. And you can take your 60-40 split and Mrs. Hale seems like a remarkable woman. The shift in topic was deliberate, calculated. Colt froze. What? I said Mrs. Hale is remarkable. We had a lovely conversation yesterday. She's wasted as a housekeeper, really. Sharp mind, excellent conversation. The kind of woman who could thrive in the right environment. Voss paused. I've invited her to dinner tonight. She accepted. The words hit like fists. You're using her to get to me. I'm not using anyone. I'm simply recognizing quality when I see it. Something you failed to do for 2 years, if I understand correctly. Voss stood, moving to the window. She deserves better than cleaning your floors, Mercer. Better than waiting for you to notice her while you chase vapid socialites. I can offer her that. You don't give a damn about Mara. Perhaps not, but I can give her things you can't. Status, security, a position in society. He turned. What can you offer? A ranch that's barely holding on? A man who saw her as furniture until everyone else left? Colt's hands clenched into fists. Voss saw it and smiled. Hit me if you want. Prove you're exactly the brute everyone suspects. That'll look wonderful when she's choosing between us. The trap was perfect. Fight and prove Voss right. Walk away and look weak. There was no winning move, so Colt chose the only option left, the truth. Mara's her own woman, he said. She'll make her own choice, and if she chooses you, I'll respect it. But don't pretend you're doing her a favor. You want to hurt me, and you found the one thing that might work. The difference between us, Mercer, is that I don't need to pretend. I can actually give her what she wants. Can you?" Colt left without answering, because the question had teeth, and he didn't know if his answer was strong enough. The ride home felt like riding through water. Everything slow, heavy, wrong. By the time he reached the ranch, Mara had returned. He found her in her room, the small room off the kitchen that he'd never really looked at before. She was packing. "What are you doing?" he asked from the doorway. "Getting ready." She folded a dress carefully. "For dinner." "You're really going?" "I said I would." "Mara, he doesn't care about you. He's using you to hurt me." She stopped folding, turned to face him. "And what if he is? What if being used by Garrett Voss as a weapon is still better than being invisible to Colt Mercer as a housekeeper? That's not, isn't it?" She crossed her arms. "He invited me, Colt, not as housekeeper, not as hired help, me. He asked about my life, my opinions, my thoughts. When's the last time you did that before 3 days ago?" The question was a blade, and it cut clean. "I know I was blind. I've said that. I'm trying to... Trying isn't enough. I need proof. I need to know I'm not just convenient, that I'm not just here because you finally ran out of other options." Her voice softened. "I need to know what I'm worth, Colt. To you. To anyone. And maybe the only way to figure that out is to see what someone else is willing to offer. He's going to offer you everything. Money, position, all of it. That what you want? I don't know what I want." The confession burst out of her. "I've spent 3 years surviving, Colt. 3 years since Thomas died, just putting one foot in front of the other. I never thought about what I wanted because wanting felt dangerous. But now..." She stopped, swallowed hard. "Now I'm 30 years old, and I have one man who barely saw me for 2 years suddenly saying he loves me, and another man offering me a life I never imagined having, and I don't know which one is real. I'm real. Are you? Or are you just scared of losing something you never valued until someone else wanted it?" The question hung between them like smoke. "Go to dinner," Colt said finally. She blinked. "What?" "Go. Have dinner with Garrett Voss. Let him make his pitch. Hear what he has to say." He stepped closer. "But when you're sitting at his table, in his fancy house, listening to his promises, remember something." "What?" "I'm the one who's been here for 2 years, living the same life you've been living, not visiting, not playing at rancher, actually doing it, getting my hands dirty, making the hard choices." He paused. "Voss can offer you a lot, but he can't offer you real, and when you figure out which one matters more, you come find me." He left before she could respond, before he could second-guess himself, before the fear that she might actually choose Voss could make him do something desperate. The hours until dinner crawled. Colt threw himself into work, fixing a gate that didn't need fixing, reorganizing the tack room, anything to keep his hands busy and his mind quiet. Pete watched him with concern, but had the sense not to comment. When the sun started setting, Colt stood on his porch and watched the western horizon burn gold and red. Somewhere 8 miles east, Mara was getting ready, putting on her best dress, maybe letting her hair down. For Garrett Voss. The jealousy was physical, visceral, but beneath it ran something deeper, the knowledge that he'd brought this on himself. Years of blindness, years of chasing illusions while reality served him breakfast. "She'll come back." Colt turned. Pete stood there, rolling a cigarette. "You don't know that," Colt said. "I know Mara Hale. Been watching her watch you for 2 years. She's not the kind of woman who gives up easy." Pete lit the cigarette. "But she's also not the kind who settles. You want her? You better be ready to fight for her. And I don't mean fighting Voss, I mean fighting your own damn pride." "My pride?" "You've spent your whole life proving you're good enough. Good enough for this land. Good enough for society. Good enough for women who wouldn't give you the time of day if you weren't rich." Pete exhaled smoke. "Mara doesn't need you to prove anything. She just needs you to choose her. Actually choose her. Not because everyone else left, but because she's who you want." The old foreman walked away, leaving Colt alone with the sunset and the truth. Night fell. Colt paced the house like a caged animal, sat down, stood up, checked the clock. 8 o'clock. Dinner would be starting. Voss would be pouring wine, making conversation, slowly building his case. 9 o'clock. The main course. Stories about his connections, his successes, his vision for the future. All the things he could give her. 10 o'clock. Dessert.
This story
the
was
moment of
posted
truth.
on the channel west
Would he
of
propose?
Betrayal.
Offer her a
Please
position
do not
as mistress of
repost
his
it
house?
in any form.
Maybe even marriage, if he thought it would twist the knife deeper into Colt's gut? 11 o'clock. The clock struck and Colt stood at the window, staring into darkness, wondering if this was it. If he'd finally lost something that actually mattered. Then he saw them. Lantern light in the distance, a carriage approaching. His heart hammered. He forced himself to stay still, to wait. The carriage pulled up. The door opened. Mara stepped out, alone. Colt met her at the door. She stood there in her best dress, dark blue, simple but beautiful. Her hair was down, curling around her shoulders. She looked tired. "How was dinner?" he asked. "Excellent. Imported beef, wine from France. Crystal that probably costs more than I make in a year." She stepped past him into the house. "He offered me everything, Colt. A position as his hostess, a house in Helena for the winters, a clothing allowance that would have made me faint 3 years ago. And I asked him one question." "What question?" "I asked if he loved me." She turned to face him. "Do you know what he said?" Colt shook his head. "He said love was a luxury, that respect, partnership, and mutual benefit mattered more. That love was what naive people chased while smart people built empires." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. He actually thought that would seal the deal, that I'd be impressed by his pragmatism. "What did you say?" "I said I'd already spent years being practical, years doing what made sense, what was safe, and I was done." She moved closer. Then I asked him if he even remembered my husband's name, the man I loved and lost. If he'd bothered to learn anything about me beyond using me as a weapon against you. Had he? No, he hadn't, because I wasn't a person to him, just a tool. A pretty tool, maybe, a useful one, but still just something to be used. She stopped in front of Colt. So I left. Walked out in the middle of his speech about compound interest and investment strategies. Came home. Here's home? I don't know yet. Is it? Colt looked at her, really looked. The woman who'd kept his world running for 2 years. The woman who'd loved him when he didn't deserve it. The woman who'd walked away from everything Garrett Voss could offer because it wasn't real. "Yeah," he said. "It's home, if you want it to be. I want proof first." "What kind of proof?" "The kind that says I'm not just convenient, not just here, not just the last woman standing." She lifted her chin. "I want you to fight for me, Colt Mercer. Really fight. Not against Garrett Voss, against yourself, against your fear that I'm not enough, or you're not enough, or this whole thing is too messy to work." "It is messy. I know, but maybe messy is real. Maybe perfect is the illusion you've been chasing." She reached up, touching his face. "I'm not perfect. I'm stubborn and scared, and I've got walls 3 feet thick. But I'm here. I'm real. And I'm asking you to be brave enough to choose messy over perfect." Colt caught her hand against his face. "I already did. The moment I kissed you. I just didn't know how to prove it." "Then start now." "How?" "By not letting go. By waking up tomorrow and choosing me again. And the day after that. And the day after that. Until I believe it." Her eyes glistened. "Can you do that?" "Yeah," he said. "I can do that." She kissed him then, softer than before but no less intense. And when they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I'm still terrified," she whispered. "Me too." "Good. At least we're terrified together." They stood there in the quiet house, holding each other, 2 people who'd spent years being alone, learning how to be something else. Outside, Montana spread dark and endless. Inside, something fragile and new began to grow. Not perfect, not easy, but real in a way nothing else had ever been. And for the first time in years, Colt Mercer stopped looking for what he thought he needed and started seeing what he already had. The next morning arrived with the kind of silence that follows a confession. Colt woke before dawn, alone in his bed, and for a moment wondered if the previous night had been a dream. Then he smelled coffee brewing and knew Mara was already awake. He found her in the kitchen, still in her nightdress with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, staring out the window at the breaking dawn. She didn't turn when he entered. Couldn't sleep? He asked. Too much thinking. She poured him coffee without asking, the gesture so familiar it hurt. I kept waiting to feel different, to wake up and have some kind of clarity. Did you? No, I still feel like I'm standing on the edge of something, not sure if I should jump or step back. She finally looked at him. Is that normal? I don't know. I've never done this before. Done what? Wanted something real. He took the coffee cup. All those other women. I was performing. Trying to be what I thought they needed. With you, I don't know how to perform. I just know I don't want to lose you. Mara wrapped both hands around her own cup. Colt, I need to tell you something about Thomas. The shift caught him off guard. Your husband? I told you it was a good marriage. That was true. But it wasn't. She paused, searching for words. It wasn't passionate. Thomas was kind and steady and safe. We were partners, friends. But I never felt like I do when you look at me. Never felt like my heart might crack my ribs open. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. With Thomas, I always knew where I stood, what to expect. This thing with you, it's terrifying because I could actually get hurt, really hurt. She met his eyes, and I'm not sure I'm brave enough for that. Colt set down his cup and crossed to her. Then we'll be not brave enough together. That's not how bravery works. Maybe our kind does. He touched her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. Maybe bravery is just being scared and staying anyway. She leaned into his hand, eyes closing. What if I can't? What if I wake up one day and the fear is bigger than the want? Then I'll remind you why you stayed. How? However I have to. He kissed her forehead. Starting with breakfast. You cooked for me for 2 years. Today I'm cooking for you. She laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. You can't cook. I can try. That's what I'm afraid of. But she sat at the table and watched him fumble through eggs and bacon, burning the first batch, salvaging the second. When he set the plate in front of her, she looked at the slightly charred food like it was something precious. It's terrible, she said after the first bite. I know. But you tried. I did. She ate it anyway, every bite, and Colt understood that this was what love looked like, stripped of performance. Burned eggs and quiet mornings, and choosing to stay despite the fear. The peace lasted 3 days. 3 days of learning to be something other than employer and employee. 3 days of awkward conversations and careful touches and slowly rebuilding what had been broken by years of blindness. Then Garrett Voss made his move. The letter arrived by courier, addressed to Mara. Colt found her reading it in the afternoon, her face pale. What is it? She handed him the letter without speaking. Colt read, Dear Mrs. Hale, I was disappointed by your abrupt departure from dinner, though I understand the confusion that must have prompted it. After reflection, I realize I may have presented my offer too pragmatically. Allow me to be more direct. I am prepared to offer you marriage, Mrs. Hale. Not a position, not employment. Full partnership as my wife, with all the rights and privileges that entails. You would want for nothing. Your security would be assured. Your position in society guaranteed. I recognize Mr. Mercer has made similar overtures, but I ask you to consider the practical realities. His ranch is struggling, water access compromised, expansion limited, debts mounting. Within a year, perhaps 2, he will face a choice. Sell to me or watch everything collapse. I offer stability, a future built on solid ground rather than sentiment. Give this the consideration it deserves. I await your response. Garrett Voss. Colt read it twice, rage building with each word. He's bluffing. The ranch isn't it? Mara's voice was quiet. The water situation. The fence damage from the storm. How much is that going to cost to fix? That's not the point. It is the point, Colt. He's saying you can't provide for me. That choosing you means choosing poverty and failure. You believe that? I don't know what to believe. She stood pacing. A week ago, I was your housekeeper. Now I'm choosing between 2 marriage proposals from men who barely knew I existed a month ago. How am I supposed to make that choice? By asking yourself which one you actually want. What I want doesn't matter if we're going to starve. The words hit like a slap. Colt stared at her and she immediately looked away, ashamed. I didn't mean, yes, you did, and maybe you're right to worry. He set the letter down carefully, fighting to keep his voice level.
This story was posted on the channel
right.
west
Maybe
of
I
Betrayal.
can't give you what he can.
Please do not repost it
Colt,
in any form.
No, it's fine. It's a fair question. What can I actually offer you? A struggling ranch, a man with more pride than sense, a future that's uncertain at best. He grabbed his hat. You should think about it. Really think. I'll be in the north pasture. He left before she could respond, before the anger and hurt could spill over into words he'd regret. The north pasture had always been his favorite. High ground, good grass, a view that stretched to the mountains. He rode Brutus hard, trying to outrun the knot in his chest. Pete found him there an hour later, fixing fence that didn't need fixing. She showed you the letter, Pete said. Not a question. How'd you know? Saw the courier. Figured Voss wouldn't miss an opportunity. The old foreman spat tobacco juice. What'd it say? Colt told him. Pete listened without interrupting, then shook his head. Bastard's got strategy. I'll give him that. He's not wrong, though. About the water. About the costs. Being right and being honest are different things. Yeah, we got problems. Every ranch does. But we're not failing. Not yet. Not unless you give up. I'm not giving up. Then why are you out here feeling sorry for yourself instead of in there fighting for your woman? Colt drove the fence post harder than necessary. Because maybe she's right to question it. Maybe I am asking her to choose struggle when Voss is offering security. Security? Pete said the word like it tasted bad. You know what's secure, boss? Nothing. Nothing in this life is secure. Voss's money could disappear tomorrow. His fancy house could burn. The only thing that lasts is what you build with your own hands and who you build it with. He paused. Thomas Hale was secure. Had a good homestead, stable income, no enemies. Died anyway. Horse threw him, broke his neck, gone in a minute. Security didn't save him. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you see that Mara's not choosing between security and risk. She's choosing between a man who sees her as a trophy and a man who sees her as a partner, between comfort and truth. And if she can't see the difference, you need to show her. How? Hell if I know. That's your job to figure out. Pete mounted his horse. But you better figure it fast because Voss isn't going to wait. Colt returned to the house at sunset. Mara wasn't in the kitchen. He found her in her room, packing again. You're leaving. She didn't stop folding clothes. I'm going to Helena for a few days. I need space to think. Running away isn't thinking. Neither is staying here with both of you pulling at me like I'm a rope in a tug of war. She finally looked at him. I can't think clearly here, Colt. Every time I look at you, I feel too much. Every time I remember Voss's offer, I feel like I'm drowning in practical concerns. I need distance. And if I ask you to stay, then you're making my point. I can't make this decision with you standing here looking at me like that. Like what? Like I'm already yours. Like the choice is already made. But it's not. It's my choice, Colt. Mine. And I need to make it without you or Voss or anyone else telling me what I should want. The independence in her voice was both attractive and terrifying. How long? I don't know. A week, maybe 2. And if Voss follows you to Helena, then I'll deal with him there. She closed the bag. I'm not choosing him, if that's what you're worried about. I'm choosing me first, for once. Choosing what I need instead of what everyone else wants from me. Colt wanted to argue, wanted to forbid it, demand she stay, make some grand gesture that would prove his love. But Pete's words echoed. She's choosing between a man who sees her as a trophy and a man who sees her as a partner. Partners didn't forbid. Partners trusted. Okay, he said. She blinked. Okay? You need space. Take space. You need time. Take time. He stepped closer. But Mara, when you're in Helena, thinking about security and stability and all of Voss's promises, remember something. What? I'm the one who burned breakfast for you. I'm the one who's going to keep burning breakfast, keep making mistakes, keep being imperfect. But I'm also the one who's going to be here when you come back. Not because I'm waiting for you to choose me, Because this is my home, and I'm choosing to make it yours too, whether you take it or not. Her eyes filled with tears. That's not fair. Love isn't fair, it's just true. He kissed her then, soft and brief, and left before she could see his own eyes burning. The stage for Helena left the next morning. Colt didn't go to see her off. It would have felt too much like goodbye, and he wasn't ready for that word. Instead, he threw himself into work. The water problem needed solving, and pride be damned, he needed help. He rode to town and found Sheriff Polk at the jail. "Need a favor," Colt said. Polk looked up from paperwork. "What kind?" "The legal kind. Voss dammed my water. He says it's legal. Is it?" "Probably. It's his land, his creek." Polk leaned back in his chair. "But there might be an angle. Old territorial water rights. If your cattle have been using that creek for more than 5 years, you might have an established right of access. Would need to check the records." "Can you?" "I can try. But Colt, even if we find something, Voss has lawyers, good ones. Fighting him in court could cost more than just digging a new well." "I know, but I need to try." Polk studied him. "This about the ranch or about Mrs. Hale?" "Both. Neither. I don't know anymore." Colt ran a hand through his hair. "I'm tired of Voss taking things from me. Water, women, dignity. I'm tired of feeling like I'm fighting with both hands tied." "Then untie them. Fight dirty if you have to." "That's not who I am." "Maybe it needs to be, at least for a while." Polk stood. "I'll check the records. Come by tomorrow." Colt spent the rest of the day riding his land, really looking at it for the first time in months. The fence lines that needed mending, the pastures that could use rotation, the small things he'd been neglecting while chasing illusions. He ended up at the Overlook where he'd first seen this land 10 years ago. Young and broke and desperate to prove himself. He'd worked like a dog to buy these acres, fence them, stock them, built everything from nothing. And now Garrett Voss wanted to take it. Not through honest competition, but through manipulation and economic warfare. The anger that thought produced was clean and clarifying. By the time Colt returned to the ranch, he'd made a decision. He couldn't control what Mara chose, couldn't force her to see him the way he needed to be seen. But he could control this, his land, his future, his willingness to fight for what mattered. He found Pete in the barn. "I need you to gather the men," Colt said. "All of them, tomorrow morning." "What for?" "We're going to war." Pete's eyebrows rose. "That's so?" "Voss wants this ranch. He's going to use every trick he knows to take it. Legal, economic, social. He'll attack from every angle until I fold." Colt's jaw set. "So we're going to attack back, not with lawyers or courts, with work. We're going to make this ranch so damn profitable, so well run, so essential to this valley that trying to crush it would crush him too." "That's a tall order." "I know. But if I'm asking Mara to choose struggle over security, I better make damn sure the struggle is worth it." Pete grinned. "Now you're talking sense. What's the plan?" They worked until midnight drafting strategy. New wells to replace the lost water access, fence repairs to maximize grazing, a deal with the railroad to ship cattle direct to market, cutting out middlemen. It was ambitious, expensive, and risky. It was also necessary. The next morning, Colt gathered his hands, 11 men who'd worked for him between 1 and 5 years. Hard men, loyal men, the kind who chose Montana because easy didn't interest them. "You all know the situation with Voss," Colt said. "He wants me to sell." "I'm not selling, but that means we've got work ahead of us. Hard work, long days, and I can't pay you extra for it." The men exchanged glances. Finally, Pete spoke up. "What can you pay us?" "Same wages. But if we pull this off, if we make this ranch successful enough that Voss can't touch it, there'll be bonuses, profit sharing. I'm not asking you to break your back so I can get rich. I'm asking you to build something that lasts." "And if we fail?" asked Tom Chen, a cowhand who'd come from California 2 years back. "Then we all fail together. But at least we'll have tried." Silence. Then Tom nodded. "I'm in." One by one, the others agreed. Not because they believed it would work, necessarily, but because loyalty meant something out here. Because a man who fought for his land was a man worth following. They started that afternoon. 3 crews working simultaneously, one digging wells, one repairing fence, one rotating cattle to fresh pasture. Colt worked alongside them, hands blistering, back screaming, proving he wouldn't ask them to do anything he wouldn't do himself. Days blurred into nights. They worked from dawn until
This
they
story
couldn't
was
see,
posted on the
ate
channel
standing
west
up,
of Betrayal.
slept in exhaustion.
Please do not
It was
repost
brutal,
it in any
relentless,
form.
exactly the kind of impossible task that made men either quit or transcend. None quit. By the end of the first week, they'd dug 2 new wells and repaired 3 miles of fence. By the end of the second, cattle were thriving on rotated pasture, weight gain visible even to untrained eyes. Word spread. Other ranchers noticed. Some offered help, lumber for fence posts, advice on well placement, labor when they could spare it. The valley was starting to choose sides, and more were choosing Colt than Voss expected. Garrett Voss noticed too. He showed up on the 3rd week, riding up to where Colt was supervising well construction. "Impressive," Voss said, surveying the work. "Didn't think you had it in you." Colt didn't stop working. "What do you want, Voss?" "To make one final offer, a good one. 50,000 for your land and stock. More than fair market value." "Not interested." "You should be. Because if you refuse, things are going to get difficult. Suppliers will stop extending credit. The railroad might find their shipping schedules too full for your cattle. Banks might call in loans." Colt straightened, meeting Voss's eyes. "You threatening me?" "I'm explaining reality. I have influence you don't, connections you'll never have, and I'm willing to use them." Voss smiled. "But it doesn't have to be war, Mercer. Take the money. Start over somewhere else. Save yourself the humiliation of slow collapse." "Or what? You'll destroy me?" "If necessary. Nothing personal, just business." "Yeah, you said that before." Colt stepped closer. "Here's what I think of your business." He drove his fist into Voss's face. The punch landed clean, snapping Voss's head back. He stumbled, hand going to his bleeding nose, shock plain on his face. You hit me!" "Yeah, and I'll do it again if you ever threaten me on my own land." Colt's voice was ice. "You want war, Garrett? You got it. But don't pretend it's just business. This is personal. It's been personal since Elizabeth Brennan chose you 10 years ago and you rubbed my nose in it. Since every time I tried to build something, you found a way to make me feel small." "I made you feel small because you are small," Voss spat blood. "A nobody from nowhere who got lucky with land. You don't belong in the same world I do, Mercer. And deep down, you know it. That's why every refined woman you courted left. They saw what I see. A brute playing at gentleman. Maybe I am a brute. Maybe I don't belong in your world." Colt's hands clenched. "But this is my world. This land. These people. And you don't get to take it just because you've got money and connections. I'll bury you." "Try." Voss mounted his horse, still holding his nose. "You'll regret this." "Probably, but I'll regret it standing on my own land, not hiding in some city because I was too scared to fight." Voss rode off, and Pete appeared at Colt's shoulder. "That was stupid," Pete said. "I know. He's going to make good on those threats." "I know that too. Was it worth it?" Colt looked at his bleeding knuckles, then at the land stretching around them. "Yeah, it was." The retaliation started 2 days later. The mercantile stopped extending credit. Voss had bought the store, they said. New ownership, new policies. The railroad informed Colt that shipping space was limited for the season, maybe next year. The bank in Helena sent a letter requesting early repayment on a loan Colt had taken to buy breeding stock. It was coordinated, efficient, designed to strangle slowly. Colt called another meeting with his hands. "It's getting worse," he told them honestly. "Voss is squeezing. I can't guarantee wages past next month. Can't promise this works out. If any of you want to leave, now's the time. No hard feelings." Nobody moved. "Boss," Tom said, "we didn't stay because of guarantees. We stayed because you're fighting. And out here, that matters more than money." "Doesn't pay bills, though." "No, but it pays something else." Pete stood. "It pays respect. And I'd rather work for a man I respect who might fail than a man I don't who'll definitely succeed." The others murmured agreement. Colt felt something crack in his chest. Not breaking, but opening. "All right then," he said. "Let's get back to work." They did. But that night, alone in his house, Colt sat at the kitchen table with his ledgers and faced the numbers. Even with all their work, he was bleeding money. The wells had cost more than budgeted. The fence materials had been expensive, and now with credit cut off and shipping delayed, income was going to dry up fast. He had maybe 3 months before he'd have to start selling cattle below value just to meet expenses. 6 months before the bank could force a sale. Garrett Voss was winning. Colt closed the ledgers and walked to Mara's room. It was empty, of course. She'd been gone almost 3 weeks now. No word, no letters, nothing but silence. He sat on her bed, breathing in the faint scent of her soap that still lingered, wondering if she was thinking about him, wondering if she'd already made her choice. The fear that she'd chosen Voss was a constant ache, but worse was the fear that she'd choose neither, that she'd decide both men were too complicated, too demanding, and strike out on her own. He'd respect that choice, would have to, but it would gut him. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He answered to find Sheriff Polk standing there holding papers. "Found something," Polk said. "In the territorial records, your water rights." And it's good news and bad news. Good news, you've got a legitimate claim to access. Creek's been used by cattle on your land for 8 years, 3 years before legal requirement. That gives you established rights. Voss can't just dam away. What's the bad news? Bad news is proving it requires a hearing. Territorial judge, lawyers, testimony could take months, and Voss's lawyers will fight every inch. How much would it cost? Polk named a figure that made Colt's stomach drop. More than he had, more than he could borrow. But, Polk continued, there might be another way. You could file an injunction, temporary order forcing Voss to restore water access until the hearing resolves it. Cheaper, faster, and it would buy you time. Would it work? Depends on the judge, but you've got a strong case. The law's on your side, even if money isn't. Colt took the papers. File it. Whatever it costs, file it. Colt, this might push you over the edge financially. I'm already at the edge. Might as well jump with purpose. Polk nodded and left. Colt returned to the table, staring at the papers. One more gamble. One more all-in bet on a future that might not exist. But what choice did he have? Give up? Sell to Voss? Prove that money and influence always won? No. He'd fight, even if it broke him, even if Mara never came back, even if he lost everything, because some things mattered more than winning. Sometimes the fight itself was the point. The injunction was filed the next morning. By afternoon, everyone in the valley knew. By evening, Garrett Voss showed up at Colt's door with 2 men Colt didn't recognize. Lawyers, probably, from their eastern suits and calculating eyes. "You made a mistake," Voss said without preamble. "Wouldn't be my first." "This injunction, it's a desperate play, and it won't work." "Maybe, but it'll slow you down. That's enough." One of the lawyers stepped forward. "Mr. Mercer, we're prepared to settle this matter. Mr. Voss is willing to restore partial water access in exchange for... In exchange for what?" Colt cut him off. "Easement rights? Profit sharing? Some agreement that gives him leverage over me forever?" The lawyer's smile was thin. "Reasonable terms." "My terms are simple. Restore full access, remove the dam, and stay the hell off my land. Anything less, we see each other in court." Voss's jaw tightened. "You can't afford a court battle. Watch me. I'll destroy you, Mercer. Not just financially, socially. I'll make sure everyone knows you're a violent brute who assaults neighbors over business disputes. I'll paint you as unstable, dangerous. No woman in her right mind would choose a man like that." The threat was clear. Voss would poison any chance Colt had with Mara. "Do what you have to do," Colt said quietly. "But know this, Mara's smart enough to see through your manipulation. And if she's not, then I wasn't wrong to fight for her. I was wrong to think she wanted to be fought for." He closed the door in their faces. Alone again, Colt leaned against the wood and wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. But the alternative, surrendering, accepting Voss's terms, living under the thumb of a man who saw other people as game pieces, that was worse than any mistake. He'd rather fail spectacularly than succeed on his knees. The night was long and sleepless. Colt lay in bed watching shadows move across the ceiling, thinking about choices and consequences, about what mattered and what didn't. about the difference between winning and being right. Somewhere in Helena, Mara was making her own calculations, weighing security against truth, comfort against chaos. He hoped she'd choose chaos, but if she didn't,
This
he'd
story was
survive.
posted on the channel
Somehow.
west of Betrayal.
Men survived
Please do
worse
not
than heartbreak.
repost it in
Though
any
right
form.
then, lying alone in the darkness, it was hard to imagine how. Dawn broke cold and gray, matching Colt's mood. He'd gotten maybe 2 hours of sleep, his mind churning through worst-case scenarios like a mill grinding grain. The injunction hearing was set for 10 days out. 10 days to hold everything together while Voss worked every angle to tear it apart. He was pouring his third cup of coffee when he heard the wagon. Too early for supply deliveries, too distinctive to be one of his hands. Colt stepped onto the porch and felt his heart stop. Mara sat in the driver's seat, reins in her hands, looking thinner than when she'd left. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her dress was travel-worn and dusty. She looked beautiful. "You're back," he said, because his brain couldn't form anything more intelligent. "I'm back." She climbed down without waiting for help. "We need to talk." "All right." They stood there, 5 feet of porch boards between them, the morning sun climbing behind clouds that promised rain. Colt wanted to pull her into his arms, wanted to demand where she'd been, wanted to ask if she'd made her choice. He did none of those things. "Inside?" he offered. She shook her head. "Here's fine. I spent 3 weeks thinking in rooms. I'm tired of walls." So they stood on the porch, and Mara wrapped her shawl tighter against the wind. "I went to see Garrett," she said. The words hit like a fist. "In Helena?" "He followed me there, took a suite at the Grand Hotel, sent flowers every day, invitations to dinner, the theater, a tour of his mining investments." She looked at him steadily. "I accepted. All of it." Colt's chest tightened, but he kept his voice level. "And? And I saw what my life would be. Beautiful dresses, servants, a house that smells like imported perfume instead of cattle and leather, parties where everyone knows the right fork to use and nobody's hands are calloused." She paused. "It was everything I never knew I could want. But it wasn't real. Every conversation was performance, every smile calculated. Garrett introduced me to his business partners like I was something he'd acquired, a pretty addition to his portfolio." Her voice hardened. "And when I asked what he actually knew about me, not my situation or my usefulness, but me, he couldn't answer. Didn't even try." Relief started seeping through Colt's defenses, but he tamped it down. "So you came back?" "I came back to ask you a question." "What question?" "If I choose you, what happens next? Not the romance part. Not the we'll figure it out together part. The actual practical reality. Because Garrett told me things, Colt, about your finances. The injunction. How close you are to losing everything." Her eyes searched his face. "Is it true?" He could lie, could minimize, could paint a prettier picture than the truth deserved. "Yeah," he said instead. "It's true." "How bad?" "Bad. I've got maybe 3 months of operating capital. The injunction might buy me time, but it's also costing me money I don't have. If I lose the hearing, I lose the water rights. If I lose the water rights, I'll have to sell cattle at a loss. And once that spiral starts..." He didn't finish. Didn't need to. So Garrett was right. "You can't provide security." "No, I can't." The admission hurt, but it was clean. "I can provide work, partnership, a chance to build something real. But if you're looking for guarantees, I don't have them." Mara was quiet
This
for a
story
long
was
moment.
posted on the channel
"Thomas gave
west
me
of
guarantees.
Betrayal.
He had a
Please
good
do not
homestead,
repost it
steady
in any
income,
form.
plans for the future. We were going to have children, build additions to the house, grow old together." Her voice cracked. "Then a horse got spooked and he was gone. All those guarantees died with him in 2 seconds." "I know." So when Garrett talks about security, all I hear is another beautiful lie. Another promise the world can break whenever it wants. She stepped closer. "At least with you, I know what I'm getting. Struggle, risk, hard work, but also truth. The kind of truth that doesn't pretend life is controllable." "Mara, I'm not finished." She held up a hand. "I also need to know that you're choosing me for the right reasons. Not because I'm convenient, not because everyone else left, not because you need a housekeeper who shares your bed. That's not..." Prove it. The demand hung between them. Colt stared at her, this woman who'd watched him fumble through years of failed courtship, who'd kept his house running while he chased ghosts, who was now standing on his porch demanding he prove something he barely knew how to articulate. How? He asked. Tell me what you see when you look at me. Not what you need from me. What you see. He took a breath. Let it out. Stripped away every defensive wall he'd built. I see someone stronger than me. Someone who survived losing everything and didn't let it make her bitter. I see hands that work without complaint, and a mind that sees through bullshit better than anyone I've ever met. He stepped closer. I see a woman who could have chosen the easy path 100 times and keeps choosing the hard one, who calls me on my worst impulses and somehow still believes I can be better. Keep going. I see the person I want beside me when everything falls apart. Not to fix it for me, but to weather it with me. I see, his voice roughened. I see home, Mara, not a place, a person. You. Tears tracked down her cheeks, but her expression didn't soften. And if I'm not enough? If you wake up one day and realize you settled? Then I'm an idiot. But I don't think that's going to happen. Why not? Because I've spent 10 years chasing women who looked perfect on paper and felt wrong in reality. You're the opposite. On paper, we don't make sense. But in reality, he reached for her hand. In reality, you're the only thing that's ever made sense. She let him take her hand but didn't move closer. I'm scared, Colt. I know. I'm scared this is just reaction, that we're both confusing need for love, that 6 months from now, we'll wake up and realize we made a mistake. We might. He pulled her closer, slowly, giving her space to resist. But I'd rather make that mistake with you than spend the rest of my life wondering what if. What if we lose the ranch? Then we'll find other land, start smaller. What if Garrett destroys you? Then we'll rebuild. What if I can't do this, can't be what you need? Then we'll figure out what you can be, and I'll adjust. That's what partners do. She was crying openly now, and Colt wiped the tears with his thumb. I don't have guarantees, Mara. I can't promise we'll succeed or even survive, but I can promise I'll choose you every day, every hard decision, every moment when walking away would be easier. I'll choose you. Even if it costs you everything? Especially then, she kissed him, not soft, not tentative, but fierce and desperate, and full of 3 weeks of doubt crashing into certainty. Colt kissed her back with everything he had, all the fear and hope and love he'd been storing up. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Mara rested her forehead against his. I choose you too, she whispered. Even though it's terrifying, even though I don't know if we'll make it, I choose you. Yeah? Yeah. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. But Colt, I need conditions. What conditions? First, we're partners. Equal partners. Not employer and employee. Not man and wife where you make all the decisions. Partners. What affects one affects both, and we decide together. Done. Second, if this ranch fails, we fail together. But if it succeeds, we succeed together. No hiding the finances from me. No protecting me from hard truths. Full transparency. Agreed. Third, she paused. Third, you have to let me help. Really help. Not just cooking and cleaning. If we're going to fight Garrett Voss, we fight him together. My ideas, my work, my stake in this. Something in Colt's chest expanded. You have ideas? I have one, but you're not going to like it. Try me. While I was in Helena, I did research, talked to people, learned things about Garrett's business dealings. She met his eyes. He's not as secure as he pretends. He's overextended, bought too much, too fast. He needs this valley to consolidate and profit, or his investors back east are going to start asking hard questions. How do you know this? Because he told me. Not directly, but in pieces. Complaints about cash flow, mentions of delayed payments, little cracks in the perfect facade. She squeezed his hands. If we can hold out, really hold out, not just survive but thrive, we can wait him out. He'll crack before we do. That's a big if.
This story was
I know.
posted on the
But I
channel
also
west
know
of
something he
Betrayal.
doesn't.
Please do not
What?
repost it in
He
any
thinks you're
form.
alone. He thinks you're just one stubborn rancher fighting a losing battle. But you're not alone. You've got loyal hands, neighbors who respect you, a community that's tired of Eastern money trying to buy their valley. Her eyes blazed. And you've got me. And I know how to fight dirty. Colt stared at her, this woman who'd just outlined a strategy sharper than anything he'd conceived, and felt something click into place. What did you have in mind? They spent the next hour planning. Mara's idea was simple but brutal. Expose Garrett's weaknesses while fortifying their strengths. Go to the other ranchers, the ones who were watching this battle unfold, and show them what Voss really represented. Not progress or prosperity, but consolidation and control. He's buying up land not to improve the valley, but to dominate it, Mara explained. Once he controls enough, he'll set prices. Water access, grazing rights, passage through his territory. Everyone will be under his thumb. They know that already. They suspect it, but suspicion isn't proof. We need to make it undeniable. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. I talked to 3 of his former employees in Helena, men he fired when they questioned his methods. They're willing to testify about his practices. False promises, contract manipulation, exploitation of immigrant labor. That's legal testimony, could work in court. Better than court. We use it in the valley. Show everyone who Garrett Voss really is. Then when your hearing comes up, you're not just fighting for water rights. You're fighting on behalf of everyone who doesn't want to live under his rule. It was risky. It was aggressive. It could backfire spectacularly. It was also the first real chance they'd had. When do we start? Colt asked. Today, Mara straightened. But first you need to marry me. He blinked. What? Marry me. Today. Now. Her jaw set. Not because it's romantic or because we're caught up in the moment. Because if we're going to fight this fight, I need legal standing. As your wife, I can sign documents, make decisions if you're incapacitated, protect what we're building in ways a housekeeper can't. That's the least romantic proposal I've ever heard. Good. Because romance is for people who have time. We don't. But her eyes softened. Besides, I'm not marrying you for romance. I'm marrying you because I love you, and because I want everyone, especially Garrett Voss, to know exactly where I stand. Colt pulled her close. Sheriff Polk can perform the ceremony. But Mara, are you sure? Once we do this, Voss is going to come at us twice as hard. He'll see it as a declaration of war. Let him. I'm done being careful, done being invisible, done letting men like Garrett Voss think they can buy anything they want. She kissed him hard. Let's go get married. They rode to town together, Mara beside him on the wagon bench, and Colt couldn't stop the grin spreading across his face. 3 weeks ago, she'd left uncertain. Now she was back demanding marriage and planning battle strategy. He'd never been more terrified or more certain he'd made the right choice. Sheriff Polk married them in his office with his wife Sarah as witness. The ceremony took 5 minutes. No flowers, no music, just words spoken quick and sure. Do you, Colt Mercer, take this woman as your wife? I do. Do you, Mara Hale, take this man as your husband? I do. Then by the power vested in me by Montana Territory, I pronounce you married. Kiss her and get out of my office. I've got paperwork. Colt kissed his wife.
This story
his
was
wife,
posted
and
on the
felt
channel
something settle
west
in
of
his
Betrayal.
chest that had been restless
Please do not
his entire
repost
life.
it in any form.
Sarah hugged Mara. About damn time. Thought we'd have to lock you two in a room together. We're not conventional, Mara said. Conventional's overrated. Sarah glanced at her husband. Polk told me about the water rights case, about Voss's pressure. You two need anything, you ask? Actually, Mara said, we do need something. We need you to host a gathering at your house. Invite the Valley ranchers. Make it seem social. Sarah's eyes sharpened. And what happens at this gathering? We show them who they're really dealing with. Understanding dawned. When? Soon as possible. I'll send invitations today. Sarah smiled. This should be interesting. They left the sheriff's office as husband and wife. The sun had burned through the clouds, turning the day bright and cold. Colt helped Mara back onto the wagon, and she leaned against him as they drove. No regrets? He asked. Ask me in 50 years. Deal. They made it halfway home before the rider intercepted them. One of Voss's men, dressed too well for ranch work. "Mrs. Mercer," the man said, tipping his hat. "Mr. Voss requests your presence at his home this evening." Tell Mr. Voss I'm no longer available for social calls," Mara said coolly. He was quite insistent. "And I'm quite married. My answer stands." The writer's expression didn't change. "He said you'd say that. He also said to tell you that the offer remains open. Should you reconsider your recent choices?" "I won't." "He said that too." The writer produced an envelope. "He asked me to deliver this regardless." Mara took it. The writer left. She opened the envelope and read, her face going pale. "What is it?" Colt asked. She handed him the letter. Voss's handwriting was elegant, controlled. "My dear Mrs. Mercer, congratulations on your marriage. How impulsive, how romantic, how foolish. I had hoped you possessed more sense. Clearly I overestimated you. No matter. When the Mercer Ranch collapses, and it will collapse, I will still be here. The offer remains available, should you wish to extricate yourself from this ill-advised union. As for your husband, I'm afraid his violence toward me will not go unanswered. I filed assault charges with the territorial marshal. Colt Mercer will face justice for his brutality. And when he's sitting in a jail cell unable to manage his failing ranch, perhaps you'll reconsider which man truly has your best interests at heart. With sincere regards, Garrett." Voss's Colt's hands clenched on the reins. "He's bluffing." "Is he? You did hit him." "He was on my land making threats." "That's not how he'll tell it." Mara's voice was tight. "He'll say you assaulted an unarmed man over a business dispute. And he'll have witnesses, those lawyers who were with him. His witnesses. Doesn't matter if they're his, their testimony will carry weight." She looked at him. "Colt, if you're arrested, if you go to trial, we could lose everything. Then we fight it." "With what?" "We can barely afford the water rights hearing. A criminal defense would bankrupt us." They rode in silence, the wheels creaking, both minds racing. By the time they reached the ranch, Colt had made a decision. "I need to see the marshal before he sees me. Get ahead of this." "What are you going to tell him?" "The truth. That Voss is manipulating the law to crush a competitor. That this is retaliation, not justice. And if he doesn't believe you, then I'll deal with the consequences." Colt climbed down and helped Mara after him. "But I'm not running, and I'm not apologizing for defending what's mine." Pete emerged from the barn, took one look at their faces, and cursed. "What now?" "Voss filed assault charges," Colt said. "Son of a bitch," Pete spat. "When's the marshal coming?" "Don't know. Soon, probably." "Then we'd better prepare. You need an alibi, witnesses, something to counter Voss's story." "I don't have an alibi. I hit him. Witnesses saw it." "Then you need context, character witnesses, people who'll testify that Voss provoked you, that he's been harassing you for months." Pete looked at Mara. "You were here for most of it. You saw how he operated." "I saw," Mara said quietly. "I'll testify." "Against the man who just proposed marriage to you? The man who could still offer you everything if Colt goes to jail?" Pete's voice was gentle but firm. "Mrs. Mercer, that's going to look like a wife protecting her husband. Won't carry much weight." "Then what will?" "Other ranchers. Men Voss has threatened or squeezed. If we can show a pattern of behavior, show that this assault charge is just one more piece of a larger campaign." Pete paused. "That's your best shot." "The gathering," Mara said, looking at Colt. "Sarah's gathering. We move it up. Make it about more than just the water rights. Make it about Voss's entire operation." "That could backfire, could make the judge think I'm trying to prejudice the case. Or it could save you." She gripped his arm. "Colt, if we're going to fight, we fight now. All in. No holding back." He looked at his wife, married less than 3 hours and already strategizing their survival, and felt something fierce and proud surge through him. "All right, we fight." The next 2 days were a blur. Sarah Polk sent invitations to every major rancher in the valley, framing it as a social gathering to welcome the Mercers' marriage. 12 accepted, 4 declined. All of them men who'd already sold to Voss or were negotiating deals. That left 8 potential allies. 8 men who might stand with Colt or might decide neutrality was safer. Meanwhile, Mara worked her own angle. She contacted the former employees she'd found in Helena, convinced 2 to come to Copper Ridge, prepared testimony about Voss's business practices. She moved through it all with grim determination, and Colt watched her transform from invisible housekeeper to strategic warrior. This was who she'd always been, he realized. He'd just been too blind to see it. The marshal arrived on the second day, Marshal William Tucker, 55 and weathered, with eyes that missed nothing. "Colt Mercer," he said from horseback. "Need to have a word." Colt met him in the yard. "I know why you're here." "Then you know I've got a complaint from Garrett Voss. Says you assaulted him on his property. Witnesses confirm it." "I hit him, but it was on my property, not his, and it was after he threatened me." "What kind of threats?" "Economic. Said he'd use his influence to destroy my ranch, cut off credit, shipping access, call in loans." Colt held Tucker's gaze. "He's been squeezing me for weeks, Marshal. The punch was a reaction to months of harassment." "Harassment's not illegal. Assault is." "Even when the harassment is designed to drive a man off his own land?" Tucker dismounted, moving stiffly. "Voss claims you're unstable, violent, that you've been harassing him." "That's a lie. Prove it." "I can't prove a negative, but I can show you the pattern. Water rights he's blocking. Suppliers he's pressured to cut me off. Bank loans he's trying to call in early." Colt gestured to the house. "I've got documentation, correspondence, evidence." "I'll look at it. But Mercer, even if Voss provoked you, you can't just hit people. Law doesn't work that way." "What does the law say about using money and influence to crush competition?" "Depends on how it's done. Could be legal business practice, could be something else." Tucker's expression was unreadable. "I'll investigate both sides. But right now, I'm here about assault. You're not under arrest, but don't leave the county. I'll be in touch." He rode away, leaving Colt standing in the yard feeling like he'd just dodged a bullet that was still circling back for another pass. Mara appeared beside him. "What did he say?" "He's investigating. Could go either way." "Then we'd better make sure it goes our way." She took his hand. "The gathering's tomorrow night. Everything hinges on it." "No pressure." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We've been under pressure since the day we met. This is just more of the same." That night, lying beside Mara in the darkness, Colt felt the weight of everything pressing down. The water rights, the assault charges, the financial strain, the gathering that could rally support or confirm their isolation. "You awake?" Mara whispered. "Yeah." "Scared?" "Terrified." "Good. Me too." She shifted closer. "Colt, if this all falls apart, if we lose everything, I want you to know I don't regret it, any of it. Even marrying a man who might end up in jail? Especially that." Her hand found his in the darkness. "Because at least I'm living, really living, not just surviving, not just going through motions, living." He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her heart beat against his chest. "Whatever happens," he said, "we face it together." "Together," she agreed. And in the darkness of their shared bed, in the house that might not be theirs much longer, 2 people who'd spent years being invisible to each other held on tight and hoped morning would bring more than just another battle.
This story
Morning
was
came
posted
anyway,
on the channel
indifferent
west
and
of
bright,
Betrayal.
and with it the
Please
day
do
that
not
would determine
repost
if
it
they'd
in any
found each
form.
other in time to save what mattered, or if love was just another beautiful thing the frontier could destroy. The Polk House sat on the edge of town, big enough to host gatherings, but modest enough not to intimidate. By 7 that evening, 8 ranchers and their wives had arrived, filling Sarah's parlor with the smell of coffee and the low rumble of careful conversation. These were men who'd built lives from nothing, who understood that one wrong alliance could cost everything. Colt stood near the fireplace, Mara beside him, watching them assess and calculate. He recognized most of them. Jack Morrison, who ran cattle south of the river. Ben Torres, whose family had been in the valley longer than anyone. Henry Walsh, newest arrival, only 3 years in but already making a name for himself. Others whose faces he knew, but whose loyalties remained unclear. Garrett Voss was conspicuously absent, though his shadow filled the room anyway. Sheriff Polk cleared his throat. Appreciate you all coming. I know it's unusual, calling a gathering like this, but circumstances are unusual too. This about the water dispute? Morrison asked. He was 60, gray-bearded, sharp-eyed. Because if it is, I'm not taking sides in a legal matter. It's about more than water, Mara said, stepping forward. Several heads turned. A woman speaking up at a ranchers' meeting was rare enough to draw attention. It's about whether this valley remains independent or becomes Garrett Voss's private kingdom. Strong words, Mrs. Mercer, Torres said, but his tone was curious, not dismissive. Strong situation. Mara gestured to two men standing near the door, the former Voss employees she'd brought from Helena. These men worked for Garrett Voss. They're here to tell you what that meant. The first man stepped forward. His name was Daniel Ross, 40-something, with the weathered look of someone who'd worked outdoors his entire life. I was foreman on Voss's operation for 8 months, Ross said, hired with promises of fair wages and good conditions. Reality was different. He brought in immigrant workers, promised them citizenship assistance in exchange for labor, then paid them half what he'd agreed, threatened deportation if they complained. Murmurs rippled through the room. Ben Torres leaned forward. You have proof? Contracts, correspondence, witness testimony from 3 workers who'll swear to it. Ross's jaw tightened. I objected. Told Voss it was illegal and immoral. He fired me the next day. No severance, no reference, nothing. The second man spoke up. I was his accountant. Name's Michael Chen. What Mr. Ross says is true, but it's only part of it. Voss has been systematically buying up land and water rights through shell companies. Makes it look like multiple independent buyers when it's all him. He's consolidating control while hiding the extent of his holdings. Why? Walsh asked. Because once he owns enough, he controls access, water, grazing rights, passage through his territory. Everyone here will either have to deal with him on his terms or leave. Chen pulled out a folder. I made copies of the records before I was fired. It's all documented. The room went quiet. These were practical men, men who understood numbers and leverage. The implications were clear. Morrison stood. Even if this is true, and I'm not saying it isn't, what's it got to do with us? Voss hasn't approached most of us. Yet, Mara said, he hasn't approached you yet. Because he's starting with the weakest target, my husband. Once Colt's ranch is absorbed, who do you think is next? She's right, Polk said. I've been watching Voss's pattern. He identifies someone vulnerable, applies pressure, makes an offer that looks generous but gives him leverage. Then he uses that leverage to expand. It's methodical. So what are you proposing? Torres asked, looking at Colt. That we all band together against him? I'm proposing we don't let him divide us, Colt said. Right now he's using the legal system to crush me. Water rights, assault charges, financial pressure. If it works, he'll have proven the model. Next time it'll be easier, and the time after that even more so. The assault charges, Morrison said carefully. You did hit him, didn't you? I did. After he threatened to destroy my ranch and everyone associated with it. After he dammed my water and tried to starve my cattle. After he... Colt stopped, swallowed his anger. I hit him. I'm not proud of it, but I'm also not going to pretend it was unprovoked. Marshal Tucker's investigating, Polk added. But the law moves slow, and Voss has expensive lawyers who know how to make slow even slower. By the time this gets resolved, Colt might not have a ranch left to defend. Sarah Polk spoke for the first time, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Gentlemen, let me put this plainly. My husband and I have lived in this valley for 23 years. We've seen people come and go, good people and bad. Garrett Voss is the worst kind, the kind who wraps cruelty in respectability, who uses the law as a weapon while claiming to be its champion. That's a strong accusation, Sarah, Morrison said. It's a true one, and you all know it, even if you're too cautious to say it. She looked around the room. So here's the question. Do we let him pick us off one by one? Or do we stand together and show him this valley isn't for sale? The silence stretched. Colt could see the calculations happening behind every pair of eyes. Risk versus reward. Pride versus pragmatism. the comfort of neutrality versus the danger of choosing sides. Finally, Torres spoke. What exactly are you asking for? Testimony, Mara said. At the water rights hearing, character witnesses who can speak to the pattern of harassment, documentation of any pressure or threats Voss has made to you or your operations, legal support if you're willing, public support even if you're not. Public support means making an enemy, Walsh said. Man like Voss doesn't forget. He's already your enemy, Colt said. You just don't know it yet. The only question is whether you fight now while you've got allies, or later when you're alone. Torres stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening valley. When he turned back, his face was set. My family's been here 40 years. We didn't survive drought and winter and raids by letting outsiders dictate terms. I'll testify. So will I, Morrison said, surprising everyone. Voss approached me last month, wanted to buy my south pasture, the one with creek access. Offered good money, but there was something off about how hard he pushed. Made me realize that creek probably matters more than he let on. Others started nodding, sharing their own encounters. Small pressures, subtle threats, offers that seem generous until you examine the terms. A picture emerged of systematic manipulation, and watching these hard men recognize they'd all been targeted was like watching ice crack. By the end of the evening, 6 of the 8 ranchers had committed to supporting Colt's case. 2 remained neutral but promised not to side with Voss. It wasn't everything, but it was more than Colt had dared hope. As people filed out, Torres pulled Colt aside. This is going to get ugly. I know. Voss isn't going to take this lying down. He's got resources we don't. Connections in Helena, maybe even Washington. So what do you suggest? Win fast. The hearing's in 5 days. If you can get the water rights restored and expose his practices in one blow, you might catch him off balance. Give him time to regroup, though, and he'll bury us all. No pressure, Colt said, echoing Mara's words from the previous night. Torres smiled grimly. Welcome to the war you started. The next morning brought a response swifter and more vicious than expected. Colt was in the barn when Pete came running. Boss, you need to see this. They rode to the north pasture and found 20 head of cattle dead. Poisoned from the looks of it. Foaming mouths, contorted bodies, the unmistakable signs of something toxic in the water they'd drunk. The new well, Pete said, voice tight. Someone dumped something in it overnight. Rage flooded through Colt, white hot and consuming. Voss. Can't prove it. Could have been anyone. It was him. This is retaliation for last night. Colt dismounted, walking among the dead cattle, calculating the loss. $5,000 minimum, probably more. Money he didn't have to lose. What do we do? Pete asked. We document it. Photos, witnesses, everything. Then we take it to Marshal Tucker. And if Tucker can't prove Voss was involved, then we prove it ourselves. But proving it was harder than anger made it seem. The well showed signs of tampering, but no footprints, no witnesses, no direct evidence linking Voss to the act. Tucker came out, took notes, promised to investigate. His expression said he knew who was responsible but couldn't prove it. This is the problem, Tucker said, standing beside the poisoned well. Men like Voss don't get their hands dirty. They hire people, pay cash, leave no trail. Even if I arrested someone, they'd never testify against him. So he gets away with it. Unless you can connect it to a pattern, show it's part of his larger campaign. Tucker looked at Colt.
This story was
Your hearing's
posted
in
on the
4
channel
days.
west of
If I
betrayal.
were you, I'd focus
Please
on
do not
winning that.
repost it
Get
in
your
any
water
form.
rights restored. Once you've got legal standing, other pieces might fall into place. It was cold comfort, but it was all Colt had. He returned to the house to find Mara at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers. She looked up when he entered, saw his face, and went pale. How bad? He told her, watched her absorb the loss, watched her hands clench on the papers, then watched her straighten her spine and get back to work. We can't afford to lose focus, she said. 4 days until the hearing. We use every hour. Mara, we just lost 20 head. We're bleeding money faster than we can. I know. I've been doing the numbers. She pushed a ledger toward him. We've got 6 weeks of operating capital left. Maybe 8 if we sell the breeding stock. But that's suicide long term. So what do? We win. She stood, crossing to him. We win the hearing, get the water rights restored, and use that momentum to force Voss into a mistake. He's rattled, Colt. Last night rattled him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have poisoned our cattle. Or he's escalating. Maybe, but escalation means desperation, and desperate people make mistakes. She touched his face. We're close. I can feel it. We just have to hold on a little longer. He wanted to believe her, wanted to see hope instead of stubbornness. But standing in his kitchen, looking at the numbers that spelled out their impending failure, hope felt like a luxury they couldn't afford. Still, he nodded, because what else was there to do? Surrender? Let Voss win? Prove that money and ruthlessness always triumphed over work and integrity? No. If they were going down, they'd go down fighting. The next 3 days were brutal. Colt and his hands worked around the clock preparing for the hearing, organizing documents, rehearsing testimony, shoring up the physical evidence of their water usage over the years. Mara coordinated with the ranchers who'd promised support, making sure they knew when and where to appear. Meanwhile, Voss's pressure continued. 2 suppliers stopped delivering feed. The bank in Helena sent another letter demanding early loan repayment. Someone, probably one of Voss's men, spread rumors in town that Colt was unstable, violent, driving his ranch into the ground through poor management. Each blow landed, each one hurt, but none of them broke what Colt and Mara were building. The night before the hearing, they sat on the porch watching sunset paint the mountains red and gold. The beauty of it felt incongruous with everything falling apart around them. Whatever happens tomorrow, Mara said quietly, I want you to know I don't regret this. You said that already. I'm saying it again, because tomorrow might end badly. We might lose everything. And I need you to know that even if we do, I'd still choose this. Choose you. Choose the fight. Colt took her hand. Why? Because for the first time in my life, I'm not invisible, not surviving, not enduring, not just getting through. I'm living, choosing, fighting for something that matters. She looked at him. That's worth more than security. Worth more than all of Garrett Voss's promises. Even if it costs us everything? Especially then. Because the alternative, being comfortable but dead inside, that's not life. That's just slow suffocation dressed up as safety. They sat in silence as darkness fell. 2 people who'd found each other in the least likely way, about to risk everything on the belief that some things mattered more than winning. The hearing convened at 10 the next morning in the territorial courthouse in Helena. Judge Martin Hendricks presiding, a man known for being fair but unsympathetic to emotional arguments. He wanted facts, precedent, law. Voss's lawyers were exactly what Colt expected. 3 men in expensive suits with briefcases full of documents and expressions of supreme confidence. They exuded the certainty that money and preparation always won. Colt had Polk, who'd agreed to represent him pro bono, and a folder of evidence that felt thin by comparison. But he also had 8 ranchers sitting in the gallery, and Mara, who'd stationed herself in the front row where everyone could see her. The proceeding opened with Voss's team presenting their case. The water in question flowed through Voss's property. He had legal right to manage it as he saw fit. The dam was properly constructed and permitted. Mercer's claims of established usage were unsubstantiated and irrelevant. They were smooth, practiced, devastating in their precision. Then Polk stood to present Colt's defense. Your Honor, the issue here isn't property rights. It's water rights, which in Montana Territory have a different legal standard. Mr. Mercer's cattle have used this creek continuously for 8 years. Territorial law establishes that 7 years of continuous beneficial use creates an appropriative right that supersedes property boundaries. That assumes beneficial use can be proven, Voss's lead attorney interjected. It can. Polk presented documents, bills of sale showing cattle numbers over the years, veterinary records showing livestock health dependent on creek access, testimony from neighboring ranchers confirming the pattern of use. The lawyers countered each piece, but Polk held ground. The judge listened, made notes, asked pointed questions that gave no indication which way he was leaning. 2 hours in, Polk called his first witness. Ben Torres took the stand. Mr. Torres, how long have you ranched in this valley? 41 years. And in that time, have you observed Mr. Mercer's cattle using the creek in question? I have. For as long as he's owned that land, his cattle water there daily during grazing season. And has Mr. Voss's dam affected your own operations? Objection. Voss's attorney stood. Relevance? Your Honor, I'm establishing a pattern of water manipulation that affects the entire valley, not just my client. Hendricks considered. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Mr. Torres. The dam hasn't affected me directly yet, but I've noticed my creek levels dropping. Water that used to flow through Voss's property and down to mine seems to be getting diverted elsewhere. More testimony followed. Jack Morrison described pressure from Voss to sell. Henry Walsh detailed offers that seemed generous until you realized they gave Voss leverage over your entire operation. The pattern emerged clearly, systematic control disguised as business. Then Polk called Michael Chen, the former accountant. Mr. Chen, you worked for Garrett Voss for how long? 14 months. And what was your role? Managing accounts, tracking expenditures and holdings. During that time, did you observe anything unusual about Mr. Voss's land acquisitions? Chen described the shell companies, the hidden consolidation, the systematic approach to controlling the valley's water resources. He had documents to back it up, copies he'd made before being fired. Voss's lawyers objected repeatedly, but the evidence was solid. Chen had been meticulous in his record-keeping. By the time testimony concluded, it was past 3 in the afternoon. Judge Hendricks called a recess, disappeared into his chambers. Everyone waited in tense silence. Colt stood outside the courthouse with Mara, neither speaking. The sun was warm, but the wind carried winter's edge. In a few weeks, first snow would fall. Cattle would need to be moved to lower pastures. Life would go on, one way or another. Whatever he decides, Mara said, we tried. Trying isn't enough. Sometimes it has to be. 30 minutes later, they were called back inside. Judge Hendricks sat at his bench, expression unreadable. I've reviewed the evidence and testimony, he said. This is a complex matter touching on property rights, water law, and territorial policy. However, the law is clear on one point. Established beneficial use creates appropriative rights regardless of property ownership. Colt's heart hammered. Mr. Mercer has demonstrated 8 years of continuous use. That exceeds the legal requirement. Therefore, I'm ordering the dam removed and full creek access restored within 30 days. Relief crashed through Colt so hard his knees nearly buckled. Mara gripped his hand, tears streaming down her face. But Hendricks wasn't finished. However, I'm also troubled by allegations of broader misconduct. Mr. Chen's testimony regarding shell companies and systematic manipulation, if accurate, suggests violations of territorial regulations regarding land consolidation. I'm referring this matter to the territorial attorney for investigation. Voss's lawyers immediately stood, objecting, claiming baseless accusations. But Hendricks waved them down. I'm not making findings of fact. I'm simply noting that credible allegations have been raised that warrant investigation. This hearing is adjourned. He struck his gavel, and it was over. They won. Outside, the ranchers who'd supported them crowded around, congratulating, slapping backs, promises of drinks later. Torres pulled Colt aside. This isn't over. You know that. I know. Voss isn't going to let this stand. The investigation will take months, maybe years, and in the meantime, he'll find other ways to squeeze you. Let him try. At least now we've got legal standing. Legal standing doesn't stop poisoned wells or burned barns, or any of the 100 ways a man with money can hurt you. Torres's expression was
This
serious.
story was posted on the
Watch your
channel
back,
West of
Mercer.
Betrayal.
This was round
Please
1.
do not repost
Round
it
2's going
in
to
any
be
form.
worse. Colt knew he was right. But for the moment, he let himself feel the victory. They'd won. Against money, against lawyers, against every advantage Voss possessed. They'd won on the strength of truth and community and the law actually working the way it was supposed to. The ride back to Copper Ridge felt different than the ride out. Lighter. Like they'd shed weight they didn't know they were carrying. We still have problems, Mara said, ever practical. The poisoned cattle, the financial strain, the assault charges. I know. But we won the big one. We did. She leaned against him on the wagon bench. So what now? Now we rebuild, get the water flowing again, replace the lost cattle, shore up the weak points. He paused. And we watch. Because Torres is right. Voss isn't done. Neither are we. They reached the ranch as sunset colored the sky. Pete met them at the barn, saw their faces, and grinned. "We won?" "We won," Colt confirmed. The old foreman let out a whoop that brought the other hands running. Someone produced a bottle of whiskey. Someone else started a fire. Within an hour, they had an impromptu celebration going. Men who'd worked themselves ragged for weeks, finally letting the tension break. Colt stood apart, watching, Mara beside him. "You should be over there," she said, "celebrating with them." "I will. In a minute." He looked at her. "First, I want to say thank you." "For what?" "For seeing what needed to be done. For pushing when I wanted to give up. For being the partner I needed instead of the trophy I thought I wanted. That's unusually articulate for you. Don't get used to it." He pulled her close. "But I mean it, Mara. We wouldn't have won without you. We wouldn't have won without each other. That's how partnership works." They joined the celebration, drank whiskey that burned, listened to Pete tell exaggerated stories about the hearing, felt the weight of months of pressure finally lifting. But in the back of Colt's mind, Torres's warning echoed. This isn't over. He was right. 3 days later, Marshal Tucker returned with news. The assault charges had been dropped. Voss withdrew the complaint, Tucker explained. Said he'd reconsidered, didn't want to pursue it further. "Just like that?" Colt asked, suspicious. "Just like that." "My guess?" After losing the water hearing and having his business practices referred for investigation, he decided adding assault to his problems wasn't smart. Tucker paused. "Or he's planning something else. With Voss, you never know." The relief was tempered by wariness. Garrett Voss didn't surrender, didn't withdraw. Every move was calculated. The answer came a week later, delivered by Ryder. A letter addressed to Colt, sealed with red wax. "Mercer, you've won your battle. Congratulations. The creek is yours, the assault matter dropped, my practice is under investigation. Well played. But understand something. This valley isn't big enough for both our operations. One of us will eventually leave or be driven out. I prefer leaving to be your choice rather than my necessity. I'm therefore making a final offer. I will purchase your ranch for $75,000. More than fair market value, enough to start over anywhere you choose. The offer stands for 30 days. If you decline, we continue as we have been. Competition, conflict, escalation. And eventually, one of us destroys the other. I have more resources, more patience, more options, but I'm also a pragmatic man. If you sell now, we both walk away. No hard feelings, no further action. The choice is yours. Garrett Voss. Colt read it twice, then handed it to Mara. $75,000, she said. That's more than the ranch is worth. It's blood money. Payment to surrender. It's also enough to solve every financial problem we have. Buy new land somewhere else. Start fresh without Voss breathing down our necks. Colt looked at his wife, searching her face. You want to take it? I want to know what you want. I asked first. She set the letter down. 3 months ago, I would have said take it. Security over pride. Safety over struggle. But now, she met his eyes. Now I know what we're actually fighting for. It's not just land. It's the right to build something without being crushed by someone who thinks money means ownership. It's proving that people like us can stand against people like him and win. We might not win. Torres is right. This could escalate into something that destroys us. It could. But it could also prove that this valley belongs to the people who work it, not the people who buy it. She took his hands. I'm not saying we have to fight. I'm saying if we choose to fight, I'm with you. And if we choose to take the money and leave, I'm with you then too. Either way, we decide together. Colt walked to the window, looking out at his land. 10 years of work, blood and sweat, and money poured into every acre. The first thing he'd ever built that was truly his. But it wasn't just his anymore. It was theirs, his and Mara's. And maybe that changed the equation. If we stay, we fight, he said. Really fight. No more half measures. We use every legal tool, every alliance, every advantage we can find. We make Voss's life as difficult as he's made ours. I know. And we might still lose. The investigation could go nowhere. He could find ways to squeeze us that the law can't touch. 3 years from now, we could be standing in ashes. Or we could be standing in a valley that's free of him, where other ranchers can build without fear, where money doesn't automatically win. She came to stand beside him. I'm tired of running, Colt. Tired of letting fear make decisions. If we're going to lose, I'd rather lose fighting than lose running. He looked at her, this woman who'd been invisible so long and now burned with fierce determination, and made his choice. We stay. You're sure? No, but I'm sure I want to try. They burned Voss's letter in the fireplace that night, watching $75,000 of security turn to ash. It should have felt like loss. Instead, it felt like liberation. The next morning, Colt called a meeting with his hands. Voss offered to buy the ranch. I turned him down. That means things are going to get harder before they get better. Any of you want to leave? Now's the time. None moved. Boss, Tom said, we stayed through poisoned cattle and legal battles and no pay raises. You think we're leaving now when it's getting interesting? It's going to be more than interesting. It's going to be war. Good, Pete said. I'm too old to die in bed anyway. They got back to work. Restored the creek access once the dam came down. Replaced the lost cattle with breeding stock bought on credit they couldn't really afford. Fortified their legal position through meticulous documentation of every Voss interaction. And they waited. Voss's retaliation came in small ways. Cattle spooked in the night. Equipment sabotaged. Suppliers pressured to raise prices. None of it provable, all of it costly. But they endured. And slowly, other ranchers started following their lead, stopped dealing with Voss, shared information about his tactics, built a network of resistance that made his consolidation harder. The territorial investigation dragged on. Months passed with no resolution, but the publicity hurt Voss's reputation. Eastern investors started asking questions. Some pulled out. His expansion slowed. Through it all, Colt and Mara worked side by side, partners in every sense. She managed the books, negotiated with suppliers, kept their legal documentation organized. He managed the land, the cattle, the physical labor that ranching required. They fought. Married couples did. Over money, priorities, the constant stress of living under siege. But they also loved. Fiercely, imperfectly, in ways that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with choosing each other daily. Winter came. First snow fell in November, heavy and beautiful. Spring followed with new calves and green grass. Summer brought cattle to market at prices that finally let them turn a small profit. A year after the water rights hearing, Colt stood on his porch watching the sun rise and realized something had shifted. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were thriving. Garrett Voss was still there, still a threat, still scheming, but his empire had cracks. The investigation had found enough irregularities to force him to sell off some holdings. His reputation was damaged. Investors were cautious. More importantly, the valley had learned it could resist. Other ranchers had seen Colt and Mara fight and win, and it had given them courage to say no when Voss came calling. The balance of power had shifted, slowly but undeniably. Mara joined him on the porch, coffee in hand. She was pregnant now, barely showing, but enough that they knew their partnership was creating something beyond land and cattle. Thinking deep thoughts? She asked. Thinking about what we built. We haven't won yet. Voss is still out there. I know, but we proved
This story
something,
was posted
that you
on
don't
the
have to
channel
be
west
perfect to
of
deserve what you
Betrayal.
work for.
Please do not
That money
repost
and power
it in
don't
any form.
automatically win. That people who stand together can push back against people trying to take what isn't theirs. That's very philosophical for a Wednesday morning. Don't get used to it. He pulled her close. But I mean it, Mara. A year ago I was chasing ghosts and losing everything that mattered. Now I've got you. Got a ranch that's actually profitable. Got respect from people whose respect matters. You've got a target on your back too. That comes with the territory, but I'd rather have enemies I earned than friends I bought. She rested her head on his shoulder. You know what the funny thing is? I spent 3 years invisible, just trying to survive, not make waves, not ask for anything. And it almost killed me. Not physically, but everything that mattered. What changed? You finally saw me, and I finally let myself be seen. Turns out being invisible isn't safety. It's just slow death dressed up as humility. They stood together watching the valley wake up, cattle moving toward water, hawks circling overhead, the endless Montana sky promising another day of work and struggle and small victories. Somewhere 8 miles east, Garrett Voss was probably plotting his next move. Somewhere in Helena, lawyers were filing motions and countermotions in cases that would drag on for years. The world kept turning, kept fighting, kept demanding that people choose between comfort and truth. But here, on this porch, with this woman beside him, and their child growing between them, Colt Mercer had already made his choice. Not perfect, not easy, not guaranteed to succeed, but real. And in the brutal honesty of the Montana frontier, where survival demanded clarity and death waited for those who lied to themselves, real was the only thing that mattered. The land would be here long after both he and Voss were dust. The cattle would graze. The seasons would turn. Life would continue its relentless march forward. But while he was here, while he had breath and will, and a partner who refused to let him surrender to fear or convenience, Colt would fight for what mattered. Not because winning was guaranteed, but because some battles were worth fighting regardless of outcome. The woman beside you, the land beneath your feet, the right to build something honest and defend it against those who thought everything could be bought. Those were worth bleeding for. And if the bleeding stopped someday, if peace finally settled over the valley, Colt Mercer would know he'd earned it. Not through perfection or superiority, but through the simple, stubborn refusal to let someone else define his worth. He'd started with everything, land, cattle, money, but no one to share it with. Now he had less land, fewer cattle, debts that would take years to clear. But he had Mara, had a community that stood with him, had a future being built by choice rather than chance. The man who couldn't choose had finally chosen, and the woman who'd been invisible had finally been seen. Together, they'd proven that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about choosing someone real and being brave enough to build something worth defending. The Montana sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist, and Colt Mercer went back to work. Because that's what you did. You chose. You worked. You fought. You loved. And if you were lucky, if you were honest, if you refused to settle for comfortable lies, you built something that lasted. Not forever. Nothing lasted forever. But long enough to matter. And in the end, that was all any of us could hope for.